Yo, yo, yo. All right, let me make sure everything's working the way I want it to. Real quick. Hang tight. All right, so real quick. So I want to talk about this stuff. There's been a lot that's been unfolding with Joe Kent as of actually the last 24 hours that I really want to be able to talk on a little bit more. I think that this is something that obviously is still a really hot topic. I also want to, I've been starting to watch some of the Tucker Carlson interview with Joe Kent as well. With that being said, I want to talk about Joe Kent. I want to talk about who he is, his history. I'm not some best friend with him. I don't have all of his history, but just the facts that I do know about the matter before getting into the Tucker Carlson interview, which I really kind of just want to watch along with you guys too. I want to start it off right at 37 minutes into that interview. It was definitely something that I personally thought was a great starting point for this interview, given all the kind of media narratives that are getting pushed currently out there. With that being said, a little bit about Joe Kent. So Joe Kent, he's actually he was special forces in the Army for 20 years, started off as Ranger, ended up being a Green Beret. Went on to work for the CIA as a CIA field operative after his 20 years of special forces. He's a Gold Star husband of his first wife, who had passed away by a ISIS attack in Syria. He's got 2 kids, since been remarried, and as of late, he has been the director of the NCTC, that's the National Counterterrorism Center. So this is a guy that has been extremely well-versed. I mean, he's got about, I don't know at this point, 30 years of working for the government in just a crazy capacity. I mean, he was special forces for 20 years before going in and working for the CIA as an operative, and then going ahead and working for the Counterterrorism Center. With that being said, I do want to let's just get into it, just so we can start to watch the Tucker Carlson interview that they just did. Tucker's absolutely phenomenal. I know I started watching this on his website. I mean, switched over to YouTube now that it's on there. And I started watching this when it was like at 1,000 views, and it is just blowing up right now. So it's, definitely a super great interview. Excited to see how much that video is going to blow up on behalf of Tucker. But I'm going to start you guys off with the backstory of Joe Kent. I want to read through his resignation letter because as of yesterday, he resigned effective immediately. And here's what he said. So he goes on to write, says, President Trump, after much reflection, I've decided to resign from my position as the director of National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. I support the values and the foreign policies that you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, 2024, which you enacted in your first term. Until June of 2025, you understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. In your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting us drawn into never-ending wars. You demonstrated this by killing Qasem Soleimani and by defeating ISIS. Early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that you should strike now. There was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times, and as a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel, I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people, nor justifies the cost of the American lives. I pray that you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran and who we are doing it for. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further toward decline and chaos. You hold the cards. It was an honor to serve in your administration and to serve our great nation. Joseph Kent, Director, NCTC. With that being said, it was a super respectful resignation letter. With that being said, he didn't go at anyone, didn't attack the presidency, did not attack the administration. He talked about the things that he was currently disagreeing with. With that being said, was, again, to the point, he wasn't being disrespectful, not by any means. I personally do not believe so. And went on to just state his reason of not wanting to be a part of what was going on in this administration. So he released that letter yesterday, resigned effective yesterday. Again, Joe Kent had 11 combat tours into the Middle East when we were over there as of the last 20 years. Again, he was a Ranger, Green Beret. He's a Gold Star husband. Again, once again, his wife, Shannon, had passed away by an ISIS suicide bombing in Syria. So this is a guy that even before he became a CIA field operative or worked for the government and started to pursue his political aspirations, has given a great deal of his life to service of the country. So this is just a really stand-up guy, from everything that I've seen with him, and have, do not disagree with him at all on his reasoning for wanting to resign. With that being said, though, there's just been a insane, campaign of just smearing him. Everyone has gone out of their way. You've got Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, Laura Loomer, all these shills sitting there and just really running his name through the mud, which is quite disappointing to see. Personally, I think that he's quite an exceptional American. He's somebody that I believe has put America first, and has really stood for, what you want to see out of a strong American leader. So with that being said, though, obviously there's been this whole just campaign of just trying to tear him down when he didn't come at the administration at all. He stated his reasons, but I want to get into this just right off the bat, and then we'll pause it at some different parts. I want to kind of watch this, though, with you guys, too. We'll pause at certain parts. We'll talk about it a little bit more, dissect it. But it's kind of just crazy. And again, kudos to Tucker for being able to get him on there, so quickly. Tucker's got a great platform, has really been speaking up, in my opinion, which is something that's really nice to see, especially in a day and age when we need more guys that are going to be able to step up, talk about the tough conversations, have those conversations and make them a little bit more public too. So let's get into it, though. This was 37 minutes in. I think a little bit more was kind of overviewing. Now is starting to, my opinion, was when I felt like it was getting into a little bit more of the kind of meat and potatoes of this entire video, where they're really just starting to ask the tougher questions. And then again, we'll expand on them. Just kind of want to watch it alongside you guys.
Imminent threat once we attack you.
Fantastic. Yeah, exactly. But there was no intelligence that said, hey, on whatever day it was, March 1st, the Iranians are going to launch this big sneak attack. They're going to do some kind of a 9/11 Pearl Harbor, et cetera. They're going to attack one of our bases.
Actually,
there was none of that intelligence. Again, back to what we know about the Iranians. They're very, very deliberate.
We're watching. It's hard to know exactly what we're watching, but it seems consistent with what we are watching. So I'm just focused on this question of, imminent
This was
threat,
it.
because that's really the only justification I think most Americans would accept for a preemptive war.
Certainly.
Otherwise, just like a war of choice done because Bibi told you to, and no one wants to get behind that because it's obviously illegitimate. So imminent threat, you're saying that there was no intelligence that you saw with the highest level clearance, obviously involved in this conversation, that showed an imminent threat from Iran to the United States?
No, unless we took certain actions, unless we came after them in a way that they thought threatened the regime. Then we basically knew what they were going to do.
Well, okay,
what
but right, of course.
Right, but like any country. So if you attack any country, we know that they're going to have a reaction.
We face an imminent threat once we attack you.
Fantastic. Yeah, exactly. But there was no intelligence that said, hey, on whatever day it was, March 1st, the Iranians are going to launch this big sneak attack. They're going to do some kind of a 9/11 Pearl Harbor, et cetera. They're going to attack one of our bases. There was none of that intelligence. Again, back to what we know about the Iranians, they're very, very deliberate with the escalation ladder. And again, they're only deliberate under President Trump's leadership because they knew and they took President Trump very, very seriously.
So, I mean, I just think it's a remarkable thing to nail down because you're not some guy on Twitter. You're a senior, as of yesterday, you were a senior U.S. Intelligence official who's not hostile to President Trump, who's not going to here to write a tell-all book or launch a media.
So just to get into it, because I know I threw you guys all into the mix of it. With that being said, basically where they're talking about is they're getting to like I said, they're getting straight into the meat and potatoes of it, talking about the hard questions, the things that I think people really want to understand. Now, with that being said, is Joe Kent was talking a little bit further about the fact of what we know, right? What we know is that there was no imminent threat. With that being said, too, what they were more so talking about, in my opinion, is, and I'm going to pull this up real quick.
So I think you're.
With that being said, too, is they were getting into, or what Joe was alluding to, was these different threat assessments that have been coming out, right? Every single year, maybe it's a few times more a year, but there are different agencies that the U.S. government employs. These are different agencies from the U.S. intelligence community that will come forward and create their threat assessments. With that being said, too, one of the things that he was alluding to a little bit more in his letter was talking about, he said, until June of 2025. With that being said, when he says things like until June of 2025, that he had his support, that was Operation Midnight Hammer. For those of you guys that don't know, Operation Midnight Hammer was where we went in, we bombed 3 different nuclear facilities. One thing that Khamenei, the Ayatollah, had basically guaranteed was, hey, if you guys attack us, we are going to escalate. They said, if you attack us, we are going to try to seek out how to build a nuclear weapon. We are going to basically figure out a way to defend ourselves even further. You attack us, we're going to get to a point where we'll attack you back. This was basically their escalation clause for if the U.S. was going to attack them. This was in June of 2025, right, guys? In March, April, and May, different threat assessment reports all came out from different agencies. One of them was in 2025. You have the 2025 Worldwide Threat Assessment by the DIA, that is the Defense Intelligence Agency. This was basically one of the threat assessments that was put together by Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz, USAF. With that being said, was in here, I believe it was page 18. So on page 18 was when they started talking about the WMD capabilities, right? When Joe Kent is sitting there and he's talking about the different capabilities of Iran, what we knew through, and here's what I'm going to kind of talk about too. As an American citizen, I would really like to hope that the hundreds of billions of dollars that go towards the intelligence community in the United States of America, that these organizations have good intelligence, that these organizations truly are gathering intelligence that is going to be useful for us as U.S. citizens. With that being said, too, is I quite frankly I do believe that they have good intelligence. I personally believe that we have adequate intelligence agencies, that all these agencies are putting together the very best and brightest of what America has to offer, that we're able to gather all this intelligence, and that all these reports that we're putting together are factual reports that will be able to get us to have our eyes on different threats that could happen to the U.S. With that being said, is when the Defense Intelligence Agency and Lieutenant General Cruz are putting together this threat assessment, I truly do believe that this is something that is, a factual report. I don't think that they just throw these reports together and hope for the best and hope that these are going to be reports that we can just trust on. With that being said, in this report, this is going back to last year. So this has been basically about a year coming for Joe Kent from, I think this initial attack in Operation Midnight Hammer was starting to be the writing on the wall for him. I think that this past year was when he really started to disagree with what the administration was doing. Likewise, I do believe that a lot of other individuals are heavily disagreeing with what's going on in this specific administration. You have an entire war that is seemingly, and we've heard Marco Rubio and Donald Trump allude to the fact that this was basically Israel's escalation, and we chased them in and we followed them as well. With that being said, though, is in this 2025 report in May of 2025, it goes on to say Iran almost certainly is not producing nuclear weapons, but Iran has undertaken activities in recent years that better position it to produce them, if it chooses to do so. Since 2019, Iran conducted activities that exceed previous JCPOA limits, including increasing the size and enrichment levels of its uranium stockpile, producing small quantities of uranium metal, restricting International Atomic Energy Agency monitoring to pre-JCPOA levels, and expanding uranium enrichment at its Fort Al fuel enrichment plant. These actions reduce the time required to produce sufficient weapons-grade uranium for first nuclear device to probably less than 1 week. Iran also continues to pursue advancements related to its chemical and biological weapons programs. For those of you that don't understand what that means, the JCPOA was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. What that entirely was the JCPOA was established in 2013 by Barack Obama. This is something that we covered in one of my last live videos as well. But in this video, we talked a little bit more in depth on it. We'll touch on it today. But the JCPOA basically was the U.S., along with other countries, were putting together to have oversight of the nuclear programs that were occurring inside of Iran. This was something that Iran agreed to in 2016. We started to have our oversight. In 2018, Donald Trump took us out of the JCPOA because part of the deal was we were sending Iran money. With that being said, though, one of the things that was really detrimental to the success of it was that we were having direct oversight into what was going on inside of Iran. We could see what type of nuclear programs they had, how much uranium was getting enriched. Usually what we'll see is that you'll have these different nuclear facilities producing 3 to 5% enriched uranium. This is low enriched uranium. We almost certainly knew that by us leaving the JCPOA, what would happen after that would that be that they would try to start having highly enriched uranium. They would start to push the level and try to have more. So we have us leaving because we were sending the money, but we had oversight as well. Now, with that being said, is to the point is I personally don't agree with us leaving. If they've been such a threat to us for the past 47 years, which is a time frame that we've been hearing so much lately, then why would we go and leave this? I mean, why would we take the time and leave the JCPOA? It just does not make sense. If they are a threat, us having direct oversight is something that's detrimental to our success. It's almost certainly something that would stop us from having further issues with them down the road. Once we left the JCPOA, almost immediately after, we start seeing them doing 90% highly enriched uranium, which is something we knew that was going to happen almost directly after the fact. Now, with that being said, is um, and I know they talk about it a little bit more in Tucker Carlson, but per their religion as well, they were not seeking out pre-2003 nuclear WMDs during this time frame. So from 2003 on over, they weren't seeking out any type of nuclear WMDs. They didn't have the type of technology. There was other reports that were put out too. This one's just one of the easiest ones to go to as well. Congress made different statements on this in early 2025 before we bombed them. But to the point, the intelligence agents or intelligence community knew that Iran did not have any nuclear weapons. They were not seeking out nuclear weapons. They did have a nuclear program, but they were not seeking out nuclear weapons. There's other parts of a nuclear facility that you can do other than just create weapons all day long. That being said, with that being said as well, is nuclear facilities, the higher enriched uranium that you have, the higher probability that a country that has the capability to have different missiles would be able to just strap a nuclear warhead on one of those as well. So again, to the point, I do think that we knew that once we left the JCPOA, they're going to be seeking out highly enriched uranium. I do believe that we also understood the fact that once we left the JCPOA, that they had technology for missiles that was highly advanced. It's not a country that I think this picture has been painted time and time again, where we believe that Iran is just some desert barren country. It is not. They are technologically advanced. They had capabilities at the time. So yeah, I think they were getting closer. But what we've seen for the past 30 years from our intelligence communities is that there is no weapons mass destruction. They do not have any intercontinental ballistic missiles that are capable of reaching the U.S. And to the point, they were not deemed a threat. Us leaving the JCPOA understood the risk that once we left the JCPOA, that they could become a bigger threat as well. What's up, pup? Sorry, my dog walked in. But with that being said, too, is what he was talking about right there, what Joe Kemp was talking about was, hey, they are not a imminent threat to us. And we still went ahead, bombed them. One thing, though, that I want to point out right now, it's right here. It says Iran senior leaders probably have not decided to restart its pre-2003 nuclear weapons program. But since April 2025, Iranian officials have threatened to revisit their nuclear doctrine if its nuclear facilities were attacked. With that being said, I truly believe that they knew that there was going to be an imminent attack. I think that they knew what was going to end up happening was that if they're attacked, they're going to seek out the weapons to retaliate with. They have this escalation clause that we've seen where it's really, they're not overreacting. We bomb them. They hit us. They hit something that's going to affect us with equal amount of missiles. I know in this interview as well, they've talked about it too. But we'll go back to that. I just wanted to touch on that statement because when they're talking about the fact of weapons of mass destruction, this is a narrative that we have continually seen pushed time and time again. So it's crucial to understand that there's declassified documents that are out there that you guys can read, and it gives the entire breakdown, the entire threat assessment of what's going on in the region. So when this media narrative, this mainstream media narrative that's been put out there is, oh, Iran has weapons of mass destruction, they're capable of blowing up these different cities, they're going to hit the U.S. mainland, it really was entirely false. If we're going off of what our intelligence community was reporting on. That being said, we'll go back on over to the
Your sober
video.
voice on this. And just to be clear, there was no intelligence that showed an imminent threat. There was no intelligence that showed they were on the cusp of building a nuclear weapon. There was no intelligence, indeed, that showed they were trying to build a nuclear weapon. And nobody said, I've seen it, but you haven't. It exists, but you just haven't seen it. Did you ever hear anybody say there is intel that shows this?
I did not know, but I know how this works. I know the Israeli officials, some in intelligence, some in government, will come to U.S. government officials, and they will say all kinds of things that we know from our intelligence just simply isn't true. And they'll say, hey, I'm giving you a preview. It's not in intelligence channels yet, but here's what's going to happen.
And to the point too, I mean, this is something that we've been seeing go on and on and on throughout the years. One of those things that we've seen go on is Bibi Netanyahu continually coming back to. We've seen Bibi come back to the U.S. government time and time again, where he's sitting there and Bibi is talking about there's weapons of mass destruction, and we saw this in Iraq. For the last 30 years, if you guys go back into it, you can find these videos online. But if you look up Bibi Netanyahu talking about weapons of mass destruction for the past 30 years, Bibi has painted this picture time and time again, where Bibi is sitting out there and he's talking about the fact, saying that there's weapons of mass destruction that are out there. Now, with that being said, is part of my trust is that I really believe that we're putting out our best and our brightest individuals into our intelligence community, that what they're gathering and putting out there in these threat assessments, like the one we just read from the DIA in May of 2025, that these threat assessments are truly factual. Our intelligence community, in my opinion, is one of the probably the most advanced intelligence community in the world. They don't just put these out there lightly. They don't just put these out there and just hope that these threat assessments that they're putting out there are factual. I truly believe that these are factual threat assessments that are out there. And when our intelligence agency is telling us, hey, look at all this stuff that we know right now, and saying, hey, guess what? The fact that Iran does not have nuclear weapons, they've not been trying to pursue nuclear weapons, but we do know if we attack them that they stated they will do it, then why are we not trusting our intelligence agencies? Why are we trusting foreign intelligence agencies over our own? Like I said a little bit earlier, we are quite literally spending hundreds of billions of dollars on our intelligence to keep Americans safe. So why are we going to all of a sudden denounce the work that they're doing and just base all of our actions off of foreign intelligence? Again, to the point, I think it's pretty much super clear to see. I truly believe that it's not coincidence that Bibi Netanyahu, every time we escalated, Bibi Netanyahu is coming over to the U.S. and then we're escalating almost immediately after. I don't think it's coincidence that for the past 30 years, he's been telling us there's weapons of mass destruction in all these different countries, and we're following him in. We're taking this blind lead after our intelligence agencies are completely denying everything that he's claiming. So again, to the point, I think Joe Kent's a great person to be able to talk a little bit further about it. So
it doesn't usually come to
wait a second. I mean, I thought that U.S. policymakers made their decisions on the basis of intelligence collected and or vetted by our intelligence. That's why we have intelligence agencies that soak up hundreds of billions a year. But you're saying that Israeli officials short-circuited the entire U.S. government and just went right to American policymakers and said, it doesn't matter what your country says, here's what we know. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, usually they're pretty slick, and they'll say, "Hey, this isn't in intelligence channels yet because it's going to take some time to get there." And here, they're on the cusp of building a bomb. They're going to, I don't know, you pick your topic. A lot of times they'll sample different things until they find what sticks. But in general, the narrative about, they're going to do a preemptive attack, or really just they're going to build a nuclear weapon. And if we don't stop them now, they're going to build a nuclear weapon. And enrichment is the pathway to that. They're going to continue enriching at whatever percent. Enrichment became the narrative. And so that hung up and that short-circuited.
Exactly what we were just talking about.
The entire negotiations, because the Iranians basically said,
posting
we're not going to
listening.
negotiate if the whole starting point is no enrichment. And again, that had nothing to do with a nuclear weapon, and the Iranians essentially agreed to that. So the Israelis came in, they moved that red line, and they would do a lot to say, like, oh, they're enriching. And you know what that means? That means in X amount of time, they could have a nuclear bomb. You have to ask now. And then the way the ecosystem would work is that the talking heads on TV, your Mark Levin's, Sean Hannity's, et cetera, they would say basically the exact same thing that night on TV, or there would be a piece written in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, that would say something very, very similar. Yet, if you looked in classified intelligence, we didn't see any of that.
I mean, that must have been such a weird experience for you.
Bizarre.
since you have access to the biggest and most powerful and presumably the best intel agencies in the world, and you're seeing people say things as fact when you know that they're not facts.
Right.
What was that like?
Infuriating. And I think that's why, in general, in the lead up to this last iteration, a good deal of key decision makers were not allowed to come express their opinion to the president.
Not allowed by whom?
I think it's important for me right now just to stay on the facts. I don't want to point names. I don't want this to become a name calling or this guy did this on this day.
But any leader has gatekeepers, and so you're saying that you were prevented from bringing this information directly to the president by gatekeepers.
Well, there wasn't a robust debate. So in general, because our assessment really hadn't changed.
So, I mean, I think it's truly upstanding. It talks a lot to his character and who he is as a guy. I think that somebody like Joe Kent is somebody who's much more objective in what he's talking about. He's getting straight to the point on a lot of this stuff. He's not saying out there trying to do this whole smear campaign like they're doing to him currently. He's talking about the things that he objects with, the things that don't resonate with him. With that being said, too, is you have this whole push where he stated the things he was not agreeing with in this administration. It's also kind of crazy, though, that you have guys like him, director of the NCTC, in the intelligence community, that are being almost shut out from any type of decision making. What is the point of having him be the director of the counterterrorism center if he's not helping create any type of, if he's not able to portray what intelligence is out there and talk further about the best possible route forward? I mean, this is somebody that, through his, through essentially his resume and the things that he's been doing, is somebody that should be, in my opinion, heavily entrusted, especially when you're talking about counterterrorism. I mean, this is somebody that was on 11 combat tours. He was an Army Ranger, Green Beret, was a CIA field operative. This is somebody who seemingly knows the rules of how we should proceed. I mean, that's safe to say. Somebody that has the type of resume he does is somebody you want to have in a boardroom when you're talking about the best possible route forward. That's just my honest take on it. So I'll keep letting him talk.
Changed. We would send those up through intelligence channels. Everybody's kind of reading the same intelligence, but then what actually gets briefed to the president can be very, very different depending on who and how it's delivered. And without a level set from the intelligence community, someone like DNI Gabbard coming in and saying, Mr. President, like, here's the full scope of the intelligence and what it means, you're kind of lacking that sanity check of where we're at, or at least a good sampling, to gauge how accurate what the Israelis are saying is. And that process, in my view,
I think that's absolutely insane,
stifled
though.
In this second iteration.
Talking about like
robust debate,
Tulsi Gabbard's not even in there.
Leading up to the 12-day war into Midnight Hammer. But this second round, to me, and I'm sure others will refute this and disagree with me, but what was conducted by just a handful of small of advisors around the president.
That is true. I believe what you're saying is true.
And I just want to
there weren't
take a pause real quick too. So, I know. So real quick, his advisors. I'm just trying to look this up. Hold on, I'm trying to pull up a list because this is going to explain so much more too. So he's getting all this intelligence information, but not allowing Tulsi Gabbard, not allowing Joe Kent into the room, people that are seemingly able to level the situation and talk about the best possible route forward. So let's see. Let's see. So, I mean, you have, I'm pretty sure, I thought Howard Lutnick was also in there. But seemingly everyone that's in there, right? Everybody that's behind closed doors, in my personal opinion, is a plethora of people that I personally do not think have America's best interests at heart. When you're talking about how this government should be operating and talking about how we should be going forward, sitting in a room with like the likes of Susie Wiles, Howard Lutnick, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, all these individuals, is probably not the best way that I'd want to sit down, break down intelligence and level, like what is Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, all these individuals in the same room, all these individuals that have zero backing, zero understanding. None of them have been in an active war zone. None of them understand the broader scope of military actions, how to proceed, what direction we need to go. And when we're sitting there and saying, hey, like, they do not have nuclear weapons, why is Joe Kent, Tulsi Gabbard, two different people that are in the intelligence community not sitting in there and breaking this down and leveling the best possible way forward? It just seemingly makes no sense to me.
A lot of people directly around the president who work there, who work at the White House, the principals, who are making an aggressive case for this war. Do you think was there a majority of like his top 10 advisors who were saying we must do this now?
I think the circle that was around him was very, very tight and very small, and I think they were all on the same sheet of music. And I think a lot of them were getting their information from the ecosystem that I described. And I think we'd be in a different place if we would have talked about the actual what the intelligence picture is and what our interest is.
So Israeli government talking points laundered through Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, is that the ecosystem you're talking about?
Yeah, and then the Israeli officials coming in and basically either ahead of time or after the fact saying the same thing, like the enrichment is going to get them a nuclear bomb in a set amount of time.
Do you believe that you and the DNI, for whom you worked until yesterday, had as much FaceTime with the president as Israeli officials did?
I don't know. I don't know that for sure because I don't know exactly how frequently the Israelis were engaging directly with the president. It did seem like Benjamin Netanyahu was, obviously that was all public, that he was in the White House.
7 times.
Yep.
Quite a bit. Yeah.
7 times.
Quite a bit.
Told you.
And then his other officials as well, Dermer, et cetera, those guys were in, they were making phone calls, just a lot of engagement from them. And again, when we would hear,
Lindsey
or you'd hear
Graham.
what they were saying,
Mark Levin.
it didn't reflect in intelligence channels, even intelligence that we shared with the Israelis, that the Israelis were giving us in many cases. So there was a clear, gap between, the intelligence and then the information that the president was given and the decisions that the president was making.
I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. Obviously, you're not going to divulge anything that's classified. I don't think you would. You definitely shouldn't, because there are people who hurt you for that, and you shouldn't. So without encouraging you to do that, I think it's a commonplace. It's understood in Washington. I've heard from many people who work in your business that a substantial portion of our information touches Israel at some point. Either it's collected by them, it is shaped by them. It's not purely American. Do you think it's fair?
Especially in the Middle East, I would say. I mean, look, the Israelis are tactically very proficient.
Yes.
They have a very competent intelligence service. And there's a lot that we can learn from them in the craft of intelligence.
Yes.
So they're very proficient. They're very good. However, whenever we get information from a liaison service, I think it's incredibly important to realize that it could be given to us to influence us as well as to inform us. And the way that I would see Israeli information, in particular coming from senior officials directly to our senior officials, that caveat just wasn't given frequently enough. And there's a lot of times, some of this is just because of bureaucratic practice, but a lot of it I think is just we feel very comfortable with the Israelis. A lot of them are dual citizens. They sound like us. They don't feel foreign. We kind of go into a more complacent mode where we trust a lot of what they have to say, not keeping in the back of our mind that they have their own agenda and we have our own agenda at the end of the day. Now, I'd say a lot of times we have the same agenda. It's very, very, I think, tactically, the same when it comes to fighting Hezbollah, when it comes to fighting terrorism, sure. But when it comes to what's our strategic goal in a war that's going to have ramifications for our nation, for the region, for global energy supplies, I think most folks right now at the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies, they would say us and the Israelis actually have a different objective here. I don't believe that our objective has been clearly defined because we're shying away from regime change. The Israelis are not shying away from regime change. They want to knock out lock, stock, and barrel the current government. They don't seem to have a plan for what comes next.
Well, that was my next question. And I think you would have heard tell of such a plan. So if you're going to take out a government, I think it's fair to ask what replaces it. And I have asked a bunch of people, many people, this question, never gotten any answer whatsoever other than there's no plan. The Israelis don't have a plan because they don't care. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's completely fair. I think as Americans, rightfully, we want a clear stated objective and end state for war. I think that's something that was born out of the GWOT, was born out of the Vietnam era. Americans want to know why we're going to war, what the end state is, and they can get on board in general if that's clearly articulated. That's not the case with Iran. The Israelis are different. I think a lot of times, again, because a lot of them speak English, they culturally feel the same, but the Israelis have a much different tolerance for how and why they're going to war and for their endurance for war. The Israelis are completely fine with Iran slipping into chaos. That means that the Ayatollah and the IRGC can't really threaten them anymore. Hezbollah's money might be cut off in their head. And so complete chaos in Iran, it's not necessarily a bad thing for the Israelis. For us, for global energy, Straits of Hormuz, our partners in the GCC, mass migration problems in Europe, this is a major problem.
It's a catastrophe for the world.
For the world, yeah.
Exactly
brag,
what
but
we're
we're pretty
seeing.
confident this show is the most.
Exactly what we're seeing too, and I was talking about this a little bit more so. I don't know if I was talking about this on Kick or on YouTube. This dog is crazy. But with that being said, we were having more so. I was talking about it on Instagram rather. I was talking about the fact of, hey, here's what's going to happen. For those of you that don't know, the way that the IRGC or Iran is structured is basically you have the IRGC. You also have these different proxy forces. So these proxy forces could be, hold on, before my pup's going to rip my headphones out. Loki. You are all wrapped up, bud. Sorry. Just got in a fight with him over my headphones. But the way that the Iranians are set up is that you have the IRGC, then you also have this entire breakdown of their proxy forces. So that's Hezbollah, the Houthis. What happens is anytime we go into any type of direct conflict, the Houthis almost immediately are going to move to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. What we've seen throughout the years is that the U.S. has provided different sanctions that basically prohibit any of our partners from doing any type of trade with Iran in hopes of trying to crush them economically. From there as well, we'll sanction them, and then we also try to shut out any bit of trade with them too. What happened though is the moment that we decide to strike them, I think the writing was on the wall to say that, hey, what's going to happen next is they're going to try to shut down the Strait of Hormuz because 23%, conservatively, 23% of the world's daily oil flows through there. That is something that is going to impact the rest of the world almost immediately. It's also going to really directly impact the U.S. So by us going in there, seemingly on Israeli intelligence, which Marco Rubio and Donald Trump immediately had replied after us attacking them, basically suggesting the fact that we've went in there because of Israel, which is not conjecture. That is a factual thing. You guys want to go look at Marco Rubio's statements immediately after the attack. They're on the internet. Same for Donald Trump. That being said, is they were going to move to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and that was going to be something that would obviously affect us right off the bat. So let's get back into it right here.
Right. And it's a little galling that I was treated to lectures for a couple of weeks about, the valiant people of Iran and how we needed to save them. And then a lot of the exile communities here in the United States of Iranians, a lot of them really nice.
And I just want to take the time real quick too, because I feel like I know where they're going to take this part. But through the U.S. putting sanctions on Iran, one of the things that we saw heavily happen as an outcome of that was the protest. We were putting a strain on the country almost immediately. We were creating these protests. We wanted to push a regime change. Through doing that, when you have a country that is heavily divided because we're putting such a strong economic strain on the entire country, it's almost kind of, crazy that, the timing of this, it was really reminiscent of the 1953 coup that had occurred at behest of the MI6 and also CIA, who was involved at the time too. So you have this protest right on cue start happening through essentially the U.S. destabilizing the region through different sanctions that were placed on them. So
people, sure, they jumped on board. We got to save our people. But by your telling and by the facts, by the way, this is not really an opinion. There's no plan for what happens after regime change. Like the people pushing that line would be happy to see a permanent civil war there.
Which is insanity. So if we do want a real regime change and we want the people to rise up and want it to happen fairly organically, going aggressively after the Ayatollah was the last thing that we ever should have done. Again, like I'm no fan of the former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. However, he was moderating their nuclear program. He was preventing them from getting a nuclear weapon. If you take him out, if you kill him aggressively, people are going to rally around that regime. And the next Ayatollah that you get,
he talks about like Joe Biden
that we have with his son, the next Ayatollah that you get is going to be more radical because he has to show the people that he's going to push back. And there's always a tension inside of Iran between the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the clerics who run the country. They have a healthy, I think, tension between the two, a rivalry. IRGC's leadership, these are Qasem Soleimani's troops. These are the guys that Soleimani trained. These guys, most of them cut their teeth in the Iraq-Iran war. A lot of them cut their teeth fighting us in Iraq. They cut their teeth fighting ISIS in Iraq and Syria. They created Hezbollah. They trained and armed Hezbollah. So these guys are actually pretty serious and pretty hardline, and they're willing to fight and they want to fight. And so by killing the Ayatollah, we've given them more power because now internally they can go and they can say, hey, all you guys who thought that we could negotiate with the Americans, you're chumps. We have to fight them. So I think the longer this goes on, the more negotiators, the more moderates that are killed off, like we just killed, Ali Laranjani, who was a negotiator, who was eager to get us a deal. Again, look, I've got no love for the IRGC. I've got no love for the Iranians. But you've got to realize,
just to be clear,
if you want it to end,
in case you're treating it now, you fought their proxies.
I fought their proxies. I mean, I put countless of them in flex cuffs or much worse. I've gone after the Iranians. I was in specialized outfits that went after the Iranians and their proxies. These are very serious people. They're not supermen by any means. They're humans, but they're serious. And if you give the IRGC a reason to take more control and they get support from the people, because again, you kill off the Ayatollah, they can say, hey, the last guy was too moderate. Look at what it got us. Like, give us more control.
I get it.
And the Iranian people are going to be like, well, actually, yeah, I don't like getting bombed by the Americans and the Israelis. Maybe we do need to listen to the IRGC.
So a lot of these, the points that you're making, I think are insightful, but they're also
so true,
pretty obvious if you kind of game it out for 10 seconds. Yeah. So it seems like you've got two different goals. You've described Israel's goal as...
I just want to take a second to point that out too, though. I mean, that's entirely something that's so true. I mean, when we are going in there, I think that, and here's the thing too, and this is one of the conversations that, people will automatically, the moment you start to push back on this war, the moment you start to talk about these facts, people will start to sit there and they're like, you're a sympathizer for terrorists, or you are liberal, or this or that, whatever they want to call you that specific day. It doesn't shy away from the fact that there's bad people out there that shouldn't be on this earth, right? But by us going in there at the force of which we entered the country, I mean, you have to think about this. One of the first attacks that we had, right? So we know based off of the intelligence that was given out in early 2025 by the DIA, various different agencies within the intelligence community, all point to the broader fact that, hey, they didn't have any weapons of mass destruction, whatever. We knew all this stuff. We still attacked them. They said they would come back stronger. You had a pretty reasonable regime that was in charge. When we open up the door and we kick that door in and we send a Tomahawk missile that kills 168 in a school bombing, I believe 110 of them were young schoolgirls. It's really just not a good look, right? Because when you go in, you have a regime change, you kill these people. What's the next extreme that's going to happen, right? So you have someone that was a pretty moderate leader. I mean, he's older, he's 87, I believe. Was getting towards the end of his life. He wasn't going to be there forever, correct? But if you remain on good standing, what's not to say that there could be negotiations? But I truly don't believe that we've wanted negotiations. If we wanted true diplomacy to happen, we would have sent more qualified individuals to be able to go talk than Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. I mean, just truly think about that. You have Steve Witkoff, a real estate developer, along with Jared Kushner, another real estate guy, and also Trump's son-in-law, going over there to do the bidding on behalf of the United States of America. Both of them are clearly underqualified. They have no understanding of anything militaristic. They don't have any understandings on how to negotiate better terms with a country that has nuclear capabilities. So why are we sending them? Is it also be weird to you guys that, you know, Jared Kushner was also somebody that was heavily intertwined with Bibi Netanyahu in Israel? So, you know, to the point too, I think that we, you know, if we wanted better diplomatic terms, we wouldn't have sent in these two Neanderthals to do the bidding at the behest of, you know, the United States. And then by us going in there and bombing, you know, different guys that are moderators that wanted peace and wanted to have negotiations to get to, you know, common grounds with the U.S., we're killing these guys. You know, what is the point? What's the greater cause here? Because every step that we've taken is to further escalate, you know, the war that's going on in Iran. And who knows what other extreme's going to come up of it. So
just regime change, permanent chaos, take Iran off the map as a coherent nation state, just tie them up with internal chaos. Whatever the effects of that are on the rest of the world, all of them disastrous. Then on the American side, you have the president's stated goal, which is we can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon, which they didn't have and weren't trying to build in any imminent way.
Right.
Okay. So if you join those two together in a common mission in a war, like that's our partner in this war,
Yeah.
then you create all kinds of very bad incentives. Mm-hmm. And now Larijani, I think, was killed by the Israelis. You saw the Israelis blow up Qatari natural gas facilities today in the Qatari natural gas field, which feeds the rest of the world LNG. Those seem like very obvious steps, not to minimize the threat
feel the
from
repercussions
Iran, but
of that one as well.
Lock down the United
that's going to be
States
something
in
that's going to be
war. We can't get out after we do
heavily
that. You kill the
affecting all of us.
negotiator. You attack our closest ally in the region, is probably Qatar. You attack Qatar, apparently? Like, no one thought this might happen?
And that's what something too that's not making much sense, right? You have Israel, who is just going in there, and they're every move that Israel has been making, I personally think has been calculated to almost really escalate this war even further. It's almost like they want further escalations. I don't know what that is, but when you have Israel going in and bombing neighborhoods in Lebanon, you have them going in there just bombing, you know, Qatari oil, like a natural gas fields too. It really is just this further escalation that's going to really it's not just the U.S. that's going to feel the repercussions. I mean, you have countries like Australia, Britain. I mean, all of Europe is going to be feeling these repercussions heavily. You have to remember that the majority of the world's oil is coming from those regions. So the fact that we're just going in there so carelessly and just bombing all these different oil reservoirs and fields. I mean, gas is going to go through the roof. It's going to be 10, 12, 13, 14, $15, by September at this rate. I mean, it's just not a good look. We are just completely devastating the whole area. You have Israel that's going in there and bombing different allies of their own. I mean, Saudi Arabia, Aramco, that was all traced back to Israel. Now Qatar traced back to Israel. So, everything that they've been doing along the way is just, almost a further escalation, which is just absolutely insane to see. So,
and there's no reins on the Israelis, unfortunately. I mean, we continue to refer to them like as our partners, or equal to the best partners we've ever had. But at the end of the day, the Israelis couldn't do any of this without us. And so we
they're
have to be
acting against our interests in a very obvious and very serious way.
And again, it's obvious if we've stated that our goal is just to take away their ability to ever even enrich and to take away their ballistics and to take away their Navy, all these kind of tactical objectives. If we say that that's our objective, and that's when we can come to a place where we can just exit, it's in the Israelis' interest to get us more and more entrenched in this.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what they're doing right now. I when the Israelis killed Laranjani, I think I may have misspoke and said we didn't kill him. The Israelis,
yes.
The Israelis struck him. But I do believe in Iran at this point of the war, they view it as, whether we like it or not, I think they view it as us and the Israelis kind of as the same thing.
Well, we've described it that way.
Because the Israelis couldn't do any of this without us. And that's where the relationship is just way off kilter. If they have different objectives than us, then what are we doing letting them drive the war?
So you just said something that's been disputed many times by I'm not going to name anybody, but by advocates for Israel. It's
by the Mark Levins of the world.
United States, which is huge. And you said they couldn't do any of this without us. You often hear its promoters, its lobbyists say, Israel just wants to fight its own wars. Back off and let us do it. Is that not?
I'd love us to run the experiment. We try that.
What would happen?
The Israelis, again, they have the ability to go out and collect great intelligence. They have a very capable military, but they're a very small country. I think Israel would be able to defend itself. I think it could conduct, limited strikes on its borders. I think it could continue carrying out pretty impressive targeted assassinations.
Yes.
Against its adversaries. And so I think you would see it relatively contained. What it couldn't do is go topple entire governments. It couldn't do something like the Iran war, the Iraq war. It couldn't aggressively destabilize Syria. These big, heavy lifts of regime change that America has been engaged in, Israel could not do on their own, which is where you get back to the Israeli lobby being just so potent and so powerful and so aggressive.
So and I want to ask you about that because that's the line that you're being attacked for.
And real quick, too, I mean, I think everyone is just entirely over and frustrated. Definitely as of more recently with this whole, Israel talk, everything that's going on. But with that being said, is you really have to be able to dissect the things that are going on. One thing that really, truly stood out to me was if you look at Trump's State of the Union address that he had a few weeks back, right? One thing that really stood out to me was every single time Trump was talking about all the successes of the country, right? Is you saw the Republicans. I mean, it was almost on cue every single time, right? You had the Republicans, which would continue to stand up and cheer every single time Trump said a statement. And the Democrats would sit down. The only time that I really remember they got a standing ovation from seemingly everyone was when you had Trump talking about Iran. And when he's talking about AIPAC and foreign influence is, the American alliance, the American-Israeli alliance, right? AIPAC. And these foreign lobbies who are donating millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to all these different political figures. Well, it just goes to show, too. I mean, one of the things that just really is quite insane to me is that we allow this. We allow these foreign governments to come in here, send millions of dollars to all these people that are going to become political figures, and then seemingly the product of what happens is that these politicians will go ahead and on all their foreign policies, they align with the same agreement. And a lot of that we've been seeing too, and this isn't an anti-Semitic, this isn't an anti-Semitic statement, but what we've been seeing is that you have AIPAC donating to 90% of politicians that are in politics, and they're all aligning with this pro-Israel support. Quite frankly, what I would much rather see is a 50-50 split of people that are pro-Israel or anti-Israel, right? Reason being is then it becomes a democracy. When you have 90% of the people that are going to have a pro-Israeli agenda, it's seemingly like that is foreign influence that is going to be caring for another country more than our own. That's probably seemingly also the reason why we've seen since 1948 over $350 billion sent to Israel. So you see this country that's over there that's, super small. It's not a big country by any means. Doesn't have this huge, population over there. But you see this country, they have free healthcare. They have all these different benefits. We're sending IDF veteran benefits. We're doing all these things for their citizens, basically based off of, hardworking U.S. Tax dollars. And when we're doing all this for foreign countries too, when are we going to be able to make that change and have politicians that want to place Americans first? Because right now there's a lot of different problems that we're seeing across the country with, we're seeing a lot of drug problems. We're seeing a lot of, 20 to 40-year-olds that aren't able to purchase houses. We're seeing, this crazy influx of just you've got Americans, hardworking Americans that are working 40, 50, 60-hour weeks just to get by. People aren't able to pay their bills. They're working paycheck to paycheck. It's seemingly not, the best times that this isn't some golden era that we're in as the United States. And when people are starting to question that and they're getting labeled as anti-Semitic, well, it's not anti-Semitic to ask why 90% of our politicians are collecting money for foreign governments and putting their best interests at heart. So, again, to the point too, I think one thing that we've been seeing is this huge media narrative that Tucker Carlson is this foreign agent. He's getting investigated by the CIA. He's got all these different people that are really just trying to down him day in and day out, when in reality, he's talking the truth for the American people. And that's something that's just, in my very honest opinion, I think that's something that is entirely reasonable to be able to ask. Why can we not put Americans first? Why do we have to put foreign agencies first, or foreign governments first, rather? That's something that really it goes back to the questions that should be getting asked in this country. So, yeah.
And so I want to go through and have you explain more fully, if you would, why you said what you did, and read it. But before I do that, one last question. Was any of this debated that you know of before this war commenced 3 weeks ago? Did anyone say, well, wait a second, if we do this and kill the Ayatollah, because that was like the first order, I think, what are the effects after? And what's the goal? Did these debates ever
I know
emerge?
they happened heavily before the 12-day war. I think that when the Israelis came back around and said they wanted to do this, I just don't think there was any debate. I think just based on the ecosystem and the amount of influence that was exerted.
Because in some ways this is a little humiliating, since I was told, the whole country was told, that after the 12-day war there was no Iranian nuclear threat. We got rid of it. I'm not imagining that. It just happened last summer.
Yeah.
Do you recall those statements?
Yeah. Operation Midnight Hammer
Yes.
destroyed their nuclear capability. So
how was it that we wound up 6 months later getting another lecture about their nuclear capability and its imminent threat to the United States and nuclear tipped ballistic missiles aimed at Miami and the whole thing? And nobody, first of all, there was no organized protest against this. Like in a normal country, you'd think people would rise up and be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Mm-hmm. You just told us 6 months ago the exact opposite. Yeah. What did internally in the intel world people say, what the hell is going on?
I just think that the planning for this was so compartmentalized that there was no debate, as in it was a foregone conclusion. Maybe the exact timing they weren't exactly aware of, or that had to be debated. When do we do it? But it seemed to be a foregone conclusion. And I'm sure others will say, no, that's not the case at all. But there was no robust debate like there was going into the 12-day war. Because the big question that a lot of us had that were skeptical of Operation Midnight Hammer was, okay, so we do this. We know the Israelis' whole goal is regime change. What makes us think they'll stop? And if they do stop for a period of time, why won't we just be back in the same place in 6 months where they're saying that we have to go back in? And that's essentially exactly what happened.
So this was raised.
This was raised, to my knowledge, in June. This was like, hey, what happens next? So you take out the nuclear, the ability for them to enrich and to potentially develop a nuclear weapon. That's done. We know the Israelis have a completely different goal. Part of that strike, Midnight Hammer, was also to get the Israelis to wrap up the 12-day war. But we knew, because of what the Israelis told us, that they wanted, this is the time to take down the regime. And they don't want the Ayatollah to be in power. They want a regime change. They want a new government there. So we said, okay, knowing that, we know that this strike, this limited strike that we're going to do, isn't going to be enough. At some point, the Israelis are going to come back to us and say, hey, we have to go again. And with that knowledge, and I think because so many of us had pointed that out, and because the Israelis had said it, there wasn't a big debate this last time. You know, I think they had that discussion, you know, behind closed doors, and there wasn't a chance for any dissenting voices to come in.
But you would think, well, I've seen it before. You know, when a question like this arises, the people making the decision go immediately to their own intel agencies, and in your case, the agency that has jurisdiction over those agencies, and say, all available intel on the question of the Iranian nuclear program, all available intel.
To the point, too, what Tucker was saying, too, is that the NCTC, the National Counterterrorism Center, I don't think that, I don't think that people really truly understand this, but the NCTC is who is specifically dishing out information to these other agencies, i.e. the CIA, the FBI. They gather a lot of their intelligence from the NCTC. So the amount of information that Joe Kent was privy to, that he would have been seeing first and foremost before it reached any of these other agencies, is kind of the tip of the spear on that. So, that's who these people are getting their information from. So just wanted to point that out.
On the question of ICBMs or its ballistic missile program, all available intel on what might happen if we topple the regime in place. Like, this has all been gamed out for a long time. There's a constant process of gathering intel on it, correct?
Yeah. And that's what we did in the lead up to the 12-day war.
But this time, no.
But this time, no. Not to my knowledge. And I'm sure the administration will come out and say, no, you just weren't invited. But I've got a pretty good idea of how those meetings look. And even if I wasn't invited, I at least would have known that they took place. Again, it just seemed to be a foregone conclusion that, like, this was happening.
So most people don't wake up in the morning and decide to feel horrible, exhausted, foggy, disconnected from themselves. But it does happen, and it happens slowly. You're working hard, you're showing up, and your energy disappears by midday.
Yeah.
And I have the feeling we're going to see some of it, but I want to ask you. But since you are an acknowledged expert on that question, and since you spent your adult life fighting Iranian proxies, and because we're always hearing some of them are in the United States, did anyone go to you and say, if we do this, what are the odds that we will have terror attacks in the homeland here in the U.S.?
That was a piece,
real quick, too. This is something that I've been talking about as well, too. So I haven't seen this part, too. So I'm kind of just watching it along with you guys as well. But this is something that I'm very interested in, right? The whole premise about everything that's been going on, personally, from what I've been seeing, is that you have it's almost this narrative that's been unfolding, right? Where I was talking about it, like possible false flags, things like that we're going to be seeing in coming days as well. You had these different threat assessments essentially that were being reported to by different agencies about all this. It's been this. Sorry, I lost my trail of thought right there. A little bit tired, but you have this narrative seemingly that's been unfolding, right? And it's almost like this false flag attack kind of being staged. It's very reminiscent of the things that we were seeing during 9/11. It's very reminiscent of other unsavory things that have happened in the past as well. With that being said, too, is usually when you start to see that, it's almost like this psychological operation. It's not conspiratorial to say that, but it truly becomes this psychological operation that we start to see unfold. With that being said, is the things that we start to see unfold is that we have, you know, this narrative that gets pushed, right? Like I said a little bit earlier, is you have, I just want everyone to get this out of their mind. There is no left. There is no right. It is this superficial conversation that continues to happen where they seemingly get both sides to argue amongst each other. You know, you got one side that's pro LGBTQ plus, you have one that's pro 2A. It's basically what it comes down to, right? So you have this constant divide and this whole bickering and back and forth time and time again. But the reason why I say that there is no left or right is when you have all these 90% of politicians, if not more, we'll call it 93, 94, 95% politicians that are bought and paid for by these same foreign lobbies that have this same foreign policy. Well, they have the same end goal, right? And so what happens is that it's this seemingly the same narrative, right? You know, Biden, Trump, they hate each other, whatever, but the foreign policy is always the same. So it's almost this bigger agenda that's been building, right? This bigger, you know, conflict that's been building that they've been allowing. Started with Trump leaving the JCPOA in 2018. We knew the repercussions of that. Then it happens with, you know, Joe Biden opening up the borders. Well, what happens when there's different conflicts, things like that? We have a higher influx of people that are trying to come in here, different refugees seeking asylum. And when we have an open border, we don't understand who's coming through here because it's an open border. We're not vetting people. We can argue about that a different day. I personally believe that if we are going to be living in a first world country, we need to have a process. I'm not saying that immigration is bad. I personally would not be here without immigration. But with that being said, too, is you need to be able to vet who's coming in here. I don't know about you, but me personally, my conviction is that I want to know what type of people are coming into this country. I want to know what type of people, you know, if I have kids someday and they're outside playing, I want to know who my neighbors are. I get that there's bad people all across the world too, but if we're just having an open border policy and we're allowing whoever in there, it's kind of unsavory. So with that being said, though, is you started to see this whole thing start to unfold, where in, you know, Biden's administration, he had the borders wide open. Well, what did we know that was happening? There was different terrorists that were coming through there. You know, intelligence is reporting on these people that are coming through there. These are guys that just are not good people by any means. Now, with that being said, too, is if we are catching these guys and stopping them and hunting them down, well, how many other people got in here that we didn't know of? You know, it's not like we have cameras and facial recognition, you know, every 20 feet that's going to be able to catch these people coming in, these people that are flying in here, not leaving, or these people that are coming in through tunnels, different things like that. I mean, there's various ways of how people can get into the United States. We don't have a wall around the entirety of the country. So with that being said, too, is it becomes this thing, too, where this narrative started getting pushed from that, right? You started to see, and I posted a video of it a little bit a while back now, but in this video, too, it's this you have 1,500 Iranians coming in here. You have 300 Iranians. You have these different terrorist groups, these guys that are linked to Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, all these different terrorist guys that are coming in here. And then they start talking about these sleeper cells. You start having this conversation time and time again about all these sleeper cells that are coming in here. Now, I mean, they're going to talk about it a little bit more from what I'm picking up on. But it's seemingly this kind of like narration that's been built all the way back to 2018. I mean, it's just teeing this all up to start unfolding. So, you know, that's a lot of where my premise is on these false flag attacks that we've talked about too, is there's this pattern recognition. And this pattern recognition is this narrative trend that we see happen. Now, we know all the way back to the 1960s and the different CIA operatives that were working as news anchors. It was a huge psychological operation that was being pushed. This is a real thing. You guys can look into it as well. It's just seemingly kind of a same trend that's been happening. You know, they're building this bigger thing to kind of plant the seed when they keep continuing to talk over and over and over and over again about all these different sleeper cells, these terrorists, people are coming in here that are unwholesome, unsavory. And it's like, okay, well, when's the, you know, beat going to finally drop? That's kind of my take on this all.
An intelligence product that we worked up on our own.
I bet.
And coordinated throughout the intelligence community. Basically, we talked about, you know, the Iranians' ability to conduct, you know, sleeper cell-like attacks, which is actually pretty limited. the whole idea of sleeper cells or a cell operating is challenging in today's environment because cells have to communicate with each other, and we're pretty good at picking up on that. The real threat, and most major terrorist organizations have kind of moved to this model, is the lone actors. It's inspiring people that are already in place by using the media. There was already a ton of blowback, because the Gaza war, Hamas used propaganda very, very effectively to, I think, curry a lot of favor with younger people here in the United States and abroad. And there was multiple terrorist attacks in America in the last year where Gaza was cited because they consumed some of the propaganda coming out of Gaza. And these people weren't, infiltrated Iranian agents. They were here, folks that were homegrown. And so we said, hey, the biggest threat right now isn't that the Iranians are going to sneak some guys over and they've been waiting here for years and they're Quds Force operatives. That's always possible. Again, the Iranians are very competent as well. And they have tried something like that before in the past, back under the Obama administration when they tried to kill the Saudi ambassador in Georgetown. So we were worried about that. But what we were more worried about was the fact that Biden had the border open for 4+ years. And I testified publicly in Congress laying out the 18,000 known suspected terrorists that potentially could be in the country. Since then, we've discovered potentially more. The problem is the bookkeeping under the Biden administration was kind of like the border. It was wide open. And so we don't know how many folks are actually in.
And to the point too, you start to see this kind of narrative unfolding though. And here's my take on it though, is to talk a little bit further on to those points too, is where you start to see this narrative unfolding about these sleeper cells, these people that are coming into the US unmonitored, unfiltered, coming in here, like Joe Ken's saying right now, we don't even know how many we're able to actually get in here and how many of those people are actually inside the country. So, now currently we have this partial government shutdown where they're disagreeing over the funding of the Department of Homeland Security. So DHS is now someone who would be more active on, taking the intelligence that they're given and being able to track these people down, get with ICE, deport them, remove them from the country, especially if they are people that are known or suspected terrorists. We should be able to be working on that information, that intelligence that we're being briefed. Again, you have to be able to put the trust. I don't want to denounce every single administration or agency based on some of the characters, but you have to be able to put the trust in the best and brightest of the United States Americans that are working in these agencies. We have to trust that. I'm not saying we have to, but I have to trust in the fact that they're competent enough to be able to find these people and track them down too. So it's just kind of coincidental timing with us going and attacking Iran, that we are also now seeing DHS not being funded. So is this going to be able to turn into a bigger problem? Hopefully not. But like he's saying, there's a lot more of lone actors. The sleeper cells are a little bit less feasible of a thing. But if they're out there too, they're going to really start to pick up on, all this information that's out there. So
the country that shouldn't be here. It's millions. How many of them have ties to countries that are adjacent to Iran or that are Iranian? As I left, we were still working on some of those numbers, but we've seen several terrorist attacks since these operations began in America, and they all fit that lone actor inspired model. So the blowback is, the longer this goes on and the more the propaganda inevitably gets weaponized, we are going to see more than likely more people here that are radicalized. Now, frankly, I think that and this is another great thing about President Trump, none of these people should be in the country. We should have tighter immigration policies. We should be focused right now. Our focus should be on finding everyone who shouldn't be in our country right now and getting them out as soon as possible, not another foreign adventure.
I wonder, so you've already seen in the wake of a recent terror attack, neocons use that attack as a way to try and censor, shut down, maybe even imprison critics of the decision to go to war in Iran. So it's almost like you control both sides. Like you advocate for a war, which inevitably stokes religious hatred because you advocate for the killing of a religious leader. Okay, so you're helping to create religious war, permanent generational religious
conflict.
And then when your country or the country you happen to be living in that you don't really care about feels the effects, when Americans are killed as a result of that, you use their deaths to justify the silencing of people who criticized you. Does that make sense?
No, exactly.
Yeah. So how much are you concerned we're going to see more of that?
I'm very concerned. I think I probably won't, but the odds are not in our favor, just considering how open our borders have been. Obviously, this type of propaganda radicalizes people. Again, we've already seen attacks. We saw attacks inspired by the conflict in Gaza. So I think we're going to see more of this, and then just, made the mistake of opening up Twitter a couple times today. There's people calling for, dissenting voices to be charged, to be locked up,
of course,
et cetera. And so,
they may be.
The erosion of civil rights, I think, during a time of conflict is nothing new. Unfortunately, we've seen it before.
It's the rule. But I wonder, though, is people talk through, or maybe they didn't talk it through, but did anybody in the lead up to this, I just want to ask it again to make sure I understand the answer, in the lead up to this war, which is now a regional war, potentially a global war, big war, biggest war of our lives, did anyone come to you and say, what's your projection for like what the effects on the United States will be? Like how many Americans could die at the shopping mall because of this, or at school?
We proactively wrote an assessment,
Yeah,
which is what we tend to do anyways. But again, there just wasn't a huge process and a debate about this last iteration.
But you're worried about it.
I'm very concerned about it.
I am too. Yeah. I am too. Yeah, I'm too. Okay, so let me read you the most controversial, and you've addressed this to some extent, but I'd like you to flesh it out a little more if you don't.
And, obviously I don't want to denounce. I think that's one of the things too that, I think that you can also be anti-war in Iran and anti-sleeper cells in the U.S. I think that, what it comes back to is this America first type of mindset is that I don't want any of these individuals in this country. But what we're doing over there right now, I don't want any of that either. Us attacking them, this conflict has become such a religious conflict. But I also, there's this kind of anti-Islamic rhetoric that's been really being produced throughout this all too. And they're trying to utilize this kind of like what we saw in going into Iraq was that we, at the time, believed we were attacked by Osama bin Laden. And you started to see this anti-Islamic rhetoric just getting heavily built up during that time frame. And, ultimately what had happened was it started to pull at the heartstrings of, the vast majority of Americans. And the outcome was that we went into war because we were so stirred up by our emotions of getting attacked by these people that they were the ones that did it to us. Now, with that being said, too, I don't believe in the anti-Islamic rhetoric. I don't believe that all Muslims are bad and want to kill you. I just really am not buying into that. I also don't agree with us being over there. But with that too is, I don't believe in what the Muslim belief is. As a Christian male, I don't agree with it. But I don't agree with this anti-Islamic rhetoric that would say that all Muslims are bad, because they're not. The religion does not teach hatred, does not teach death to all Americans, which we're really heavily almost trying to indoctrinate everyone to believe in. So that's something that I just entirely disagree with. Is somebody that has quite a few different friends that are Muslims. I don't agree with any of this by any means. I don't have to agree with the religion just based on my own beliefs, but I don't have to believe in all this rhetoric that's getting built up saying that all Muslims are bad people, because they're not. So, quite frankly, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying the war in Iran. I am just really over this whole mainstream, media narrative that we continue to see pushed. If it's not one thing, it's another.
Mind. You say support the values and the foreign policies that you campaigned on during 3 campaigns and that you enacted. You understood up until June of 2025 that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. Early in this administration, this is the change. High-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that you should strike now. There was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again. So, I think you've explained how the echo chamber and the lobbying campaign worked. It wasn't just on Fox and the Wall Street Journal. It was by telephone and text message. It was in person, and it was relentless. And there was no countervailing campaign. There was almost nobody who went to the president and said, well, actually, here's the American view, which is frustrating. But then you allude at the end of that to the Iraq war. And I think you told me at dinner last night, I think you spent 5 years total. 11 combat deployments. You spent about, 5 years.
Yeah, 9 of those deployments were to Iraq for 6 to 8 months. So, yeah.
Okay, so you've had some time to think about the Iraq war.
yeah. More time than is healthy, yeah.
Can I just say, because it makes me... So here you go, you join the Army at 18, yeah.
You
spend your whole young life there. You go to all these wars, 11 deployments. You spend 5 years in Iraq, over 7 deployments, and you reach a series of conclusions, fighting and being shot at by Iranian proxies, and now you say, I don't think this war is good for America, and you're being slandered as a bad, unpatriotic quitter who secretly sympathizes with the Ayatollah. I just have to ask you how that feels.
It's always the same people.
they love you when you're just saluting and moving out, but then the second you say, I don't think we should be doing this and I have an opinion now, then all the attacks come at you. But I truly believe that that God put me where I am right now, really putting me through everything I've been through in my life to bring me to this point. I don't believe that God said, hey, you're here now in this moment to just sit back and be a good soldier for this iteration. I've had lots of friends who have said, hey, I think you would have been more value staying in the administration with your experiences. And I understand that and I'm flattered by it. But considering all that I've seen, the conclusions that I've reached, I feel like I'm here for a reason. And something I think probably on my third or fourth deployment, as I was realizing that we were lied to get us into Iraq, and that we had a whole mess that we now had to clean up, and how much it mirrored and echoed Vietnam.
So to the point too, so when he's talking about us being lied to and going into Iraq, we were fed the information that what we were going into Iraq for in 2003 was weapons of mass destruction. Took us 20 years to find out, maybe not the full 20 years, but it took us 20 years seemingly to find out that there was never any weapons of mass destruction that were actually in the region at all. Who was the one that was initially that gave us all that information stating that, hey, there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Well, that was Bibi Netanyahu and Israeli Mossad intelligence. So we were fed that from them, and there was never any type of weapons of mass destruction out there. So, this was 20 years of a conflict that took we'll call it $2 to $4 trillion of U.S. taxpayer dollars, and added to our deficit of things that we owed. So that, that we were indebted, we'll call it $4 trillion, right? Over 20 years of a war in the Middle East, to where we never set up that country for success. We never set it up to be a country that we can work with. It's not a country that has our best interests at heart. So, it's kind of tough because you have a lot of guys over there that are extremely disgruntled, that, served, went over there, and, all that work, all that effort, that, blood, sweat, tears, the lives that were lost for what? Because the intelligence that was fed to everyone was that there was weapons of mass destruction. This country was going to, take out the United States of America, yada, yada, was all just a complete lie. So, the frustrations, the level of frustrations, the countless lives that were lost, the countless, guys that came back with issues, PTSD, limbs lost, different scars that not everyone's going to see, or scars that people can see. It's, it's really demoralizing when you have, an entire generation of just guys that devoted time to fighting for something we thought was, a bigger cause, and it wasn't. So, I think that's entirely frustrating too. So I'm happy he's bringing that up. And this is also a guy who, after 20 years of service in the special forces, he had also lost his first wife there in Syria through a proxy force that was basically propped up by the United States government. So it's good to hear him talk about this too. I definitely, like I said too, it's extremely disheartening to see how much, somebody that's dedicated so much of their life. Being 18, serving 20, getting out at 38, going into the CIA, working as an operative, then dedicating more of his life to, this same cause. It's kind of, disheartening to see how much he's been slandered, and lied about, having people just say the absolutely most heinous things about his first wife. It's disgusting to see. And it's all coming from the same people on the right. It's all coming from the same people on the right that were the draft dodgers, the people that never did anything overseas, the same people that collect money for foreign agencies. All these people with their meaningless lives that have done nothing more than, seek out personal gain, are going to sit there and just slander him. It's entirely, like I said too, it's entirely disgusting to see. But that's currently the day and age that we live in. Even the idiots have a platform.
I remember as, being in my mid to late 20s, being very frustrated with a lot of the Vietnam veterans who did not speak up against. I know some did, but especially Vietnam veterans who stayed in service as I had intended to do, who stayed in service and who advocated for the Iraq War. Colin Powell is someone who I have a lot of respect for the way he fought in Vietnam, his leadership in Desert Storm, but then the way that he was part of lying to get us into the Iraq War and then staying on and continuing those lies, knowing full well, having all the experiences of being a guy on the ground in a feudal war that was, basically we were deployed to under false pretenses. He had all that knowledge, and because he wanted to be loyal to, I think, the president, and I think he wanted to be loyal to what he felt was the government that would eventually get it right, he didn't step out and say, we shouldn't be doing this. And I just remember reflecting on that. And I said to myself at the time, and this might seem silly and idealistic, but said to myself at the time, if it's ever my turn, if it's ever my generation's turn, I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure this doesn't happen to the next generation. So a real breaking point for me, I did the best I could for a couple of weeks as this war started from the inside to try and find off ramps to try and provide information to see what I could do from the inside. But watching the casualties roll in, and I don't want to use anyone's loss as a political talking point, but for me personally, watching more casualties come in, I just couldn't stand by as both a veteran and then as a Gold Star husband.
I really wish that he would talk on it too, but one thing that's been weighing heavy on my heart is that one of the things we've seen is this different release of different casualties that have come up from the war. With that being said, too, is, there's been a release of, the initial 6 that were killed. I believe there was more that also were released as well during this conflict. But I truly believe that there's been a lot of lying about the numbers of casualties. Just looking at the destruction that the Iranians have been able to, incur on us overseas, the bases that have been destroyed, the jets that have been lost, the planes. There's all these different reports. It seemingly makes you question too, how many more American lives have been lost? Is this truly just the number? This number is sub 10 American fatalities. I personally think that any American fatality in this incident is just a huge loss for America. It's incredibly, saddening to hear. Any loss of life, especially an American, is just very, very sad to hear. So, again, to the point, I think that there's probably a lot more that we have not heard of or has not been released yet. I don't know if that's coming with some kind of propaganda, media narrative that's being pushed too. But, the definition of winning, I think, has seemingly been lost just from the actual videos, the factual videos that have been released from the area. I wouldn't call us winning is us losing our entire foothold in the Middle East due to our actions to attack, because that's what it is. You have multiple different air bases and bases that the U.S. had that are completely obliterated. They're gone. Millions upon millions of dollars of equipment, years upon years of work that are just gone, and we are no longer in some of those territories. So, I wouldn't call that winning. I wouldn't call us killing a few leaders as winning when their entire ecosystem, everything that they've developed to this point, was based off of this. It was based off the fact that, hey, you take out this guy, well, he's in place. You take out this guy, well, he's in place. And it doesn't, for us to sit there and say that we understood the entire intricacies of how their entire ecosystem works is a complete BS statement, in my opinion. I mean, when you break it all down and you start to look at it, right, it's like, okay, well, they're utilizing all these different proxies. You have all these different powers. You have the IRGC and the Ayatollah. But when you start to break it down with, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, whoever it may be, all these different proxy forces, well, you can take out a lot of the leaders, but they already had these different, plans set in action for, this different set of successions to occur when you take out these guys. So, are we going to continue to just devastate the world economy and bomb all these different, oil fields and set us back years of production and just continue to tank the economy to where Americans can't afford gas anymore? They can't afford, Americans can't afford anything anymore. Or it's going to get to that point. So, it just, I don't know. I'm going to let them talk. Just frustrating.
And say, like, I'm just going to continue to soldier on in this. It's time to try something different. I know this path that we're on, it doesn't work. I've seen enough data. It's time to do something different.
How hard a decision was it?
it became really clear to me, over the weekend, this past weekend, that our message just wasn't getting through. And I was like, I know what happens if I stay. If I stay and I go along with this, I'm going to be knee deep in it, trying to just chip away and make a difference. But my ability to have my voice heard, to present data that runs contrary to the trajectory and the agenda that the administration's on, that's going to be squashed before it even really reaches the White House. And so I knew I had kind of hit my limit of effectiveness in that capacity. So really, it should have been a hard decision, but for me, it was crystal clear. It was like, number one, I can't be a part of this in good conscience, and I need to do everything I can to actually speak out about it, and speak out in a way that I hope resonates with the president and with some of my former colleagues. I understand they might be mad at me. They're getting hard questions from the media, but I really want them, as we descend even further into this war, I really hope that they take the time to reflect and to realize that we still have time to get us out of this.
It's also super
and also
wild
for the
that
77
Trump
million
was
people
sitting there and just calling
who
him
voted for
weak.
no new wars, who voted for the foreign policy that President Trump enacted in his first administration, the foreign policy that I described. I mean, President Trump's first foreign policy, the one that he ran on, the one that he destroyed the Republican neocon establishment on, was incredibly pragmatic. We're not saying you have to be some kind of a pacifist. We are saying, though, that you have to be very, very deliberate and judicious in how you use force, and you also have to use the full scope of the American toolbox. You use diplomacy, you use our economic leverage, and again, this isn't something that I came up with. President Trump came up with this. President Trump enacted this. And this is why 77 million people voted for him. It's probably not the only reason. But the no new wars, put America first, don't let us bleed out in the Middle East. That's what people voted for. And that's what I think you campaigned for. And I think that's something he could get us back to if he just takes a look and assesses how we got to where we are right now.
So I want to get to that in a minute. Your solution. And, I just want to be transparent about my motives. Not in this to attack anybody.
Right.
I'm concerned to the point of agitation about where this is going and its effects on the United States. I hope I'm wrong, but I believe it, and I think you do too. Yeah. I think this is the most serious thing that's happened in my lifetime. So I want to fix it, and I don't want it to happen again.
Exactly.
And I don't want history to be written in real time by liars in such a way that no one understands what we're going through, and then we make the same mistakes. And this is a principle that any parent applies to his own children. No, say out loud what you did, and you're less likely to do it again. So before I say that, I just want to pause just on your personal experience. I know you hate talking about this. I'm not going to make you uncomfortable by pushing too much, but you feel it. I feel it as an observer, such sadness for the men who've been used, including you. And I wonder how, given everything you've done and everything you've just said, how you don't feel bitter at the response that you've gotten from some people. How do you keep the bitterness out?
I think faith. I've got a great wife. God's blessed me twice with my late wife Shannon, my wife Heather, our two boys, Colt and Josh, who I think are watching this hopefully. So faith and staying grounded on what's important.
Yes.
But then also look, the people who faith. I've got a great wife. God's blessed me twice with my late wife Shannon, my wife Heather, our two boys, Colt and Josh, who I think are watching this hopefully. So faith and staying grounded on what's important.
Did you say his
but then also
boys'
the people
name
who
are
are
Colt
coming after me
and Josh or Colton?
I believe that the internet
Josh.
is like 25% real. I think there's a lot of bots.
I
There's a lot of people who got delivered a talking point and they're going to get a paycheck for it.
I've noticed.
Or they just, they want the adoration. So I just don't take most of it seriously. And again, look, I know there's some of my former colleagues, people who I do like, who have had to come after me. And I understand that too. Like, I get it. Like, they're still there. They've got to discredit everything I'm saying right now. They're watching, taking notes. So I'm not bitter about that. I literally just want to focus on the task at hand. And the task at hand is stopping us from getting deeper into this quagmire. Because again, like just looking back on my experiences in Iraq, I don't feel like this happened. There wasn't the ability to. There wasn't this platform. There wasn't, the free independent media that existed in any real way that could reach people.
That's right.
And so to me, we have this opportunity. So I'll be bitter and angry later when, I read Twitter and somebody who I used to like says that Joe Kent's a traitor and we're going to fire him tomorrow anyways. We don't have time for that. Like, as you pointed out, major things are happening right now in this war, and the president is facing some very, very challenging decisions. So I personally just hope that he and his closest advisors listen and think, and that's the main priority.
So I strongly agree, and we can't allow hatred of us to inspire hatred in ourselves. You can't become a hater. It'll destroy you. It's what they want. So I salute you for avoiding that, and it's absolutely real. I spent a lot of time with you, and you're not a hater at all. You don't even seem that bothered. So that's incredible, given where you are. It's amazing. It's an act of faith, and I love it. End of the history portion of the segment, but I just think it's important to establish why you said, first, the war in Iraq, second, the conflict in Syria, which took the life of your wife, why both of those were driven by Israel.
Well, the war in Syria never would have happened without the war in Iraq. I mean, so had we not gone in and invaded Iraq, we wouldn't have had the conflict in Syria. But Syria was always a major problem under Assad for the Israelis, both under his father and under the Bashar al-Assad, Hafez al-Bashir, because of their support, the relationship with the Iranians, their support for Hezbollah.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yep.
And so they wanted to get rid of Assad as well. They saw Iraq as a vehicle for not just taking down Saddam Hussein, who posed a threat to them as well, but also as a way, a lily pad, if you will, to get rid of Syria. And basically...
So Assad must go, which was a slogan that all of a sudden emerged out of nowhere.
Right.
That was not like an organic American desire. It wasn't like Americans woke up and were like, the problem really is this ophthalmologist from Syria. He must go. It was that reflected the priorities of Israel, not
Israel. And then I think you had the echo chamber as well, because you had all the usual suspects. You had FTD, and you had all these different other organizations that were out there saying that, like, now's the time to,
Barry Weiss,
break off the shackles.
Expert on Syria.
The next thing you know, like, there'll be a Syrian Thomas Jefferson that'll take over, and instead we got the former leader of Al Qaeda. But a big reason that Syria became next after Iraq. In Iraq, we screwed the whole thing up so badly that we toppled Saddam, destabilized, fought a bitter insurgency. The Sunnis eventually aligned with Al Qaeda, but then we beat them down so heavily because the Shias are the majority of the country. The Shias took over. Shias largely, the Shias that we installed in Iraq, the Dawa Party, Badr, Skiri, et cetera, heavily aligned with Iran. And so at the end of the Iraq war under Obama, there was this whole, like, oh crap, we just handed basically the keys to Baghdad to the Iranians, who, again, hostile to us. Qasem Soleimani is running all over the place, funding proxies. It's a great deal. It helps Iran circumvent sanctions, their relationship with Iraq. And we just spent trillions, lost nearly 5,000 Americans there. And now we have this Shia superstate. And so then there was a ton of pressure coming from not just the Israelis, but I think also a lot of the Gulf to say, hey, we've got to get rid of Assad as well. Because now you have this Iranian land bridge that goes basically from Damascus all the way to Tehran, and then you can hook that down into the Lebanese area where Hezbollah is. So next thing you know, well, if you want to get rid of the guy Assad, who's an Alawite, well, you got a country full of, like, really angry Sunnis, and what are those guys going to turn into? And so next thing you know, we're now on the side of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. ISIS gets out of control, and we have to deploy back to Iraq, back to Syria, to put out essentially the brush fire that we created. And so that's why I put all of those together. Because again, without Israel's influence, would all of this have happened? Would the Iraq War have happened? Maybe, but they heavily lobbied for it. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu, you can pull up tapes on YouTube. Like the guy was lobbying heavily back in 2002 for us to do regime change in Iraq, and he has stayed in power ever since. Ariel Sharon, who initially was the PM in the lead up to the Iraq War, initially was against it because he wanted us to focus on Iran, but then towards the end he got on board as well. But the Likud party that's in power and has been driving Israeli politics now for most of my adult life, they were heavily in favor of the regime change war in Iraq, which again led to Shia domination, led to the rise of ISIS, led to the rise of Al-Qaeda, and then heavily fueled the Syrian civil war. So again, this country, Israel, who they can be a good partner in some regards. I'm not anti-Israeli. I've worked with the Israelis. Again, very competent intelligence service, very wonderful people, but they have different objectives than we do. So to put them in the driver's seat of our foreign policy and to let them dictate our foreign policy is a disservice to the American people.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, I think, I think you're understating the effect. Disservice suggests like an inconvenience.
It's dangerous. Yeah.
Now we're looking at bankruptcy and death and collapse of the dollar and lots. And I'm not blaming Israel. By the way, I'm not blaming Israel for any of it. I'm blaming supine American leadership that takes this. I don't understand it at all. And that kind of leads to the most uncomfortable question of all, and I don't know if you can answer it. I don't think I can answer it. But since all of these dynamics are very well known to everyone in Washington, everyone who pretends this is not real, the Tom Cottons of the world, Lindsey Grahams or whatever, the liars, everybody knows. Everybody knows, pro-Israel people know, anti-Israel people know that what you're saying is true. I don't think there's any debate about any of it. So since it was clear that we were being pushed by the Netanyahu government into this war, that they were choosing the timing, they chose the timing. Right? I mean,
I'll take Marco Rubio's word for it.
I'll take Marco Rubio's word for it. Was it ever discussed the option that you mentioned at the beginning? Like, how about now?
I don't know if everyone knows that video
Not
real
that
quick.
I know of.
But that video of Marco Rubio, where I'm going to pull it up real quick. I'm going to just pause for a moment. This is... I'm going to pull this up. Hold on, guys.
Okay, so then you have to ask,
I just got to show this one real quick. So immediately after, and like I said earlier in this stream too, is when we had attacked Iran, one of the statements that immediately happened right afterwards.
Saying it's just the start of a relentless campaign that could last more than a month. Those words backed up, in fact, by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said the war will take some time. Well, let's hear the words then from Marco Rubio.
If we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
That's the clip that they're talking about. So again, I think it's super hilarious because you have guys that are in power that are sitting there confirming the fact of things that we all knew too. And it was that we had followed in Israeli intelligence into the region. So I don't know why we can't talk about that. Just besides the fact, let's go back to
following
this.
a logic train here. What kind of pressure does it require to get a president who campaigned against exactly this thing for 10 years to do exactly this thing? What does it take to do that?
I wish I knew definitively. I think there's two potentials, there's two schools of thought. I mean, one is the media echo chamber, the donors, the way the Israelis come in and kind of launder the information like I
think he
like I
knows
described
more.
previously. And then the other option is much darker. I mean, we still don't know what happened in Butler. We don't know what happened with Charlie Kirk. And by no means am I saying like, the Israelis did this or any of that, but I'm saying there's a lot of unanswered questions there. And there is enough data to at least say that there's a good chance that President Trump feels like he is under threat. We're not allowed to ask, basically, was there any linkage between what took place with Asif Merchant, who was recruited by the Iranians to come to America to recruit proxies to kill President Trump. The FBI put a confidential human source at him. All this is public now. This is all out there in the open. And he's arrested. And then 2 days later, a sniper takes a shot at President Trump. We think Merchant and we know the CHS was talking about the human source that the FBI put at Merchant. They were talking about, hey, we could kill the president potentially with a sniper rifle. But then they arrest him. 2 days later, Butler happens. And Crooks, according to the official narrative anyways, is an enigma. We don't know anything about him. We can't get into his devices. If we did get into his devices, maybe there's nothing there. No more questions are allowed to be asked about Thomas Crooks. The DHS IG is currently being blocked from investigating Butler as well. That's out in the media. That's all well known. Your investigative journalist found that Crooks did indeed have an online persona,
Quite an
online
extensive
footprint.
one.
And he was talking
Yeah.
to people. So
Yeah.
it's like, why aren't we investigating this? I mean, if
An attempted murder of a presidential
attempted
candidate?
murder of a presidential candidate, and then there's another assassination attempt. There's been multiple public breaches of President Trump's security over the last year. And then, Charlie Kirk is killed publicly in a very horrific way, and we're not really even allowed to look into that at all. And Charlie Kirk was one of President Trump's closest advisors, and he also advocated heavily against a war with Iran. He was in the Oval Office in the lead up to the 12-day war. I wasn't particularly close with Charlie. He was very gracious to me when I was running for Congress, very, very supportive. So we knew each other. And the last time I saw Charlie Kirk on this earth was in June in the West Wing, in the stairway, and I said hi to him, and he looked me in the eye, and he said very loudly, and it's a small, you've been in the West Wing, it's small, it's a tight space, and he said, Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran, very loudly.
He was single-minded.
And he walked off, and he went, I believe, into the Oval. So when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran, and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated, and we're not allowed to ask any questions about that. It's a data point. It's a data point that we need to look into.
What do you mean when you say we're not allowed to ask any questions about that?
We've been told that this individual, Robinson, is a lone gunman, and maybe he is. But the investigation that I was a part of, the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. And the FBI will say that they stopped that because they wanted to turn everything over to the Utah state authorities. Everything's going to trial. It's very, very sensitive. But there was still a lot for us to look into that I can't really get into. But there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down. And I'm not making any conclusions. I'm not saying
No, I don't think you are.
because of this happened. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's unanswered questions. We know the pressure because of the text messages that have been made public that Charlie was under a lot of pressure from a lot of pro-Israel donors. And again, we know Charlie was advocating to President Trump against this war with Iran. And we knew at the end of the 12-day
I just gotta say too, the fact that the director of the NCTC, the National Counterterrorism Center, was getting shut out from being able to help investigate any type of foreign entities being involved in these situations is absolutely insane, especially with Charlie Kirk too. The fact that they weren't being allowed by the FBI to have any type of investigation, any type of research that would have looked further into it, is just absolutely wild to me. So, who was it? Was there any type of foreign governments that were involved? Why can the director of the Counterterrorism Center not look into any, this is somebody that's heavily interconnected in the intelligence community. Why is he not able to access that?
war at the end of Midnight Hammer that the Israelis were going to come back and ask us to go back to war again.
Right.
So we have a lot of data points between Butler, the assassination attempts against President Trump, the breaches of his security, what happened to Charlie Kirk.
Can I just ask you to pause on the Charlie Kirk just because it upsets me to
me too.
hear what you're saying, to be reminded that he was murdered, but also to hear you confirm what was reported in the media several months ago, that your office had been blocked from investigating his murder. That does not make sense to me. I don't understand why you would ever turn down help in an investigation from a U.S. agency with a lot of experience in gathering intelligence on things. That's your job.
The FBI will say, and the DOJ will say that because it's an ongoing case, it's a Utah State case, that back off, they've got it. They've got a smoking case. They've got the fingerprints on the gun, and they've got the case.
But the FBI was involved in the case.
The FBI was involved. The FBI's basically said that they're deferring to Utah because it's now a state case.
They've established a precedent for federal investigation of this crime.
Yeah, and the National Counterterrorism Center's mandate is to investigate.
It's kind of crazy, though, that you would have a federal agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, get involved and then so quickly solve this case and hand it over to the state and then say that there's no federal involvement. I mean, to me, that personally doesn't make much sense. There is a federal involvement in the case. Federal involvement seemingly should take precedence over the state. So the fact that they're getting shut out like that is kind of crazy to me. It also doesn't make much sense considering, at the end of the day, a lot of intelligence is gathered from the NCTC to the FBI. They rely heavily on the things that they can find for these investigations. So if they're trying to offer help and be able to look further into something, why are they being shut out?
Investigate any foreign ties to see if there's potentially any foreign ties. If we don't find any foreign ties, we back off. What I'm saying, without getting into too much detail, is there was more for us to investigate.
You believe there was reason to investigate foreign ties to Charlie Kirk's murder, and were told by the FBI, DOJ?
FBI and DOJ, yeah.
No, you're not allowed to investigate that.
Stop. It's done. They basically cut off our access to be able to get into that information. And look, I didn't even say necessarily I believe there's 100% foreign ties. There were data points that we needed to investigate. I mean, I think anybody who's even looked at any kind of police investigation, you get 100 leads, you run them down, and 99 don't mean anything. We still had a lot more leads to run down that pertained to some kind of a foreign nexus that we were stopped from investigating. And
that just strikes me as inconceivable that could happen. And again, I was aware of it from reading about it, but not really to the extent that you've just described. So I would love to hear the justification for that. And can you flesh that out a little bit more? What were you told was the reason to prevent you, as a federal intelligence official, running the National Counterterrorism Center, from looking into the murder when you had reason to look into it?
Well, the way the bureaucracy works is they can just kill things in process. So initially we were cut off pretty early on from being able to access like the files and being able to send people out there. We sent people out initially to work in the task force. After the crisis period, the first week or so, that dispersed, and we basically were told that, hey, we'll get back to you if we find any kind of foreign ties, et cetera, that we want you guys to look into. Meanwhile, we had already dug up a decent amount of leads. Again, I'm not saying that we had anything concrete, but we found more work that we needed to do to say that we had done our due diligence. We were then told that, hey, you guys need to stop. You can't work on this anymore. I had a bureaucratic dispute about it. Eventually, we were allowed to continue to investigate. But then in very short order, all the requests that we would make that normally different parts of the interagency with the FBI being on point would facilitate data share. Data sharing is a big thing that NCTC does. Those requests were just never met, or in my opinion, not an honest effort was given to fulfill those requests. Just basic information that any competent police service, which I believe Utah has, and the FBI, that they would have access to help us run down the leads to either confirm or deny some kind of foreign activity. So we were cut off from that. They didn't ever officially come back and say, you can't look at this anymore. All of the requests just continued to die on the vine with the various agencies that we needed to actually fulfill those requests.
I just can't imagine a legitimate justification for that. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but from a non-specialist perspective, something horrible has happened. The U.S. government, its core function is to investigate crime, particularly murder. Here you have an agency whose job it is to run down the rabbit trails you've described, and you're stopped from doing that. We don't want the information.
Right.
Why would any person engaged in a legitimate pursuit say, I don't want more information?
I mean, especially considering there was people posting online prior knowledge of what was about to happen. So a lot of the justification for stopping us from investigating hung on, hey, we've got the guy, his fingerprints are on the gun. We got video of him jumping off the roof. Like, this is a slam dunk case. Okay, even if it is a slam dunk case that he took the shot, what about all the people who had prior knowledge? All just the basic investigative questions. Like, how did he get there? You map it out. Nothing. This isn't rocket science. I mean, this is anything that anyone with common sense would know to ask. But basically, once they caught him, once he turned himself in, his fingerprints were on the gun. It was basically pencils down. Utah has the rest of it. There's nothing else to see here. And I'm.
And to the point, though, is especially in an investigation, for people to believe the narrative that's being pushed to is a proper investigation is supposed to be able to tie all these points together. The amount of holes and inconclusive evidence that we've been seeing throughout that whole Tyler Robinson case, it's just nothing adds up. And that's why you have a lot of different voices like Candace Owens, Baron Coleman, all these, a lot of different, I'm blanking on names right now, but a lot of different people that have been investigating this from the get-go that are like, hey, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense. Well, none of it does when you look at the entire narrative. So seemingly good police work, good detective, investigation would be able to tie all those points together. But quite frankly, everything that they tried to tie together just didn't add up. I mean, let's just start with the fact that Charlie's spine, his Superman spine, stopped a 30 out of 6. That was the first lie. So, it's just anything from there afterwards with, Tyler Robinson on the roof, disassembling the gun, reassembling it, disassembling it, reassembling it, getting on the roof, getting out of there, taking a shot, not zeroing in the scope. I mean, it's not really a tough shot to make. But the shot placement's pretty spot on. But again, to the point of 30 out of 6 with a good scope, even not zeroed in, is going to be able to do some pretty good work. Again, for somebody that's never gone outshot, climbed up on a roof, heart rate's pumping, to get it off in the time frame after disassembling, reassembling, reassembling a rifle, which isn't easy to break down, and then having a shot hit him where it did, just doesn't add up. I mean, when you start to look at the whole breakdown of that too, the wound that we were seeing was more so reminiscent of an exit wound. That's not an entry wound. So, there's just a lot of stuff that's not adding up too. So if the NCTC was trying to go in there, investigate all, any and all leads to help actually build a case and have a proper route of investigation, the fact that they're getting shut out or lied to throughout the process, when they're trying to investigate foreign ties, which is, without alluding to it, kind of seemingly the direction that Joe's been pointing to, is, I mean, it's kind of crazy. It just makes you think a little bit more too, especially, when you're starting to hear things like that after already feeling like you've been getting lied to time and time again from, the government. It's just, kind of something that's super unsavory to hear.
Over there thinking I'm in crazy town saying like, no, we have all these different leads that we need to run down. Just from my perspective. Now, the people who had prior knowledge, I believe most of them were American citizens, so that would be on the FBI to go run down. But again, not without saying anything specific, there was more work for us to do on the potential of a foreign nexus. Again, not saying there is one, but we had more work to do and we were blocked from doing that.
I can't, my heart is pounding listening to this. I just would want people listening to this to assess two things. One, are you over your skis? Are you making claims you can't prove? No. Two, is there any conceivable motive, dark motive, that you would have for wanting to know more about this murder, to wanting to investigate it? And I don't think any rational person could construct a bad motive for wanting to know. It's your job.
Yeah.
It's the government's job. And so I think the onus is on people who are preventing the collection of information to describe why they're doing that. That's the question for them. Why wouldn't you want to know? Specifically, you may not know the answer, of the people who demonstrated prior knowledge of Charlie Kirk's murder online, and there were a number of them, are you satisfied that all of them were interviewed by the FBI in person?
I have no idea. I don't know. I just think, considering they knew Charlie was going to be assassinated, and there was enough of them that it wasn't just some rando who maybe he tags every TV USA post with that. There was enough of them that there's something there. I don't know what that something is.
Well, by definition.
But we haven't seen any arrests. So to me, there's more work to be done. And because that could have been posted from anywhere, that would be in the purview of the FBI or NCTC, or if they're overseas. And to me, I personally did not see any effort being taken to continue to run that down. Now, I'm sure they will say, hey, we're open to anything. We'll continue to investigate. But, we're coming up on several months now. Why hasn't this been done?
Are you bothered by it?
I'm very bothered by it. I'm very bothered by it. Like I personally did not know Charlie well, but Charlie Kirk is a generational figure. I mean, he led a movement. He was speaking to millions of young Americans who came out and who voted for President Trump. And he was just a genuine great man, husband, father. I mean, how can you not like Charlie Kirk? But also the fact that he was murdered so publicly. And yes, there's been a lot of sympathy, and his movement has grown, et cetera. But actual curiosity about getting to justice, to figuring out what happened. That makes me furious that we're being blocked from that, and that we're not allowed to ask the question anymore. We're just not allowed to talk about it anymore. And I think that's absolute insanity. And what does that mean? What does that mean that there are people and there's entities out there that don't want us looking into this? And I'm sure they're preparing the response right now. And they're saying that's because we don't want to screw up the Robinson trial. Like, okay, if the Robinson trial is so slam dunk, then don't worry about it. He's got his fingerprints on the rifle, et cetera. But there was people publicly posting they had prior knowledge of this. And I'm here telling you, as someone who's involved in the investigation, there was more stones for us to overturn. And every time we asked, we were blocked. And then they leaked the New York Times, and we had to blow up, and we had to throw them out of the room because they're crazy, et cetera. So it's incredibly frustrating that there's not more, especially considering how pivotal Charlie was to the MAGA movement and to President Trump, that there hasn't been a more concerted effort to find the truth and to find justice.
Do you think there will be?
I pray there is. I hope this helps. I know, you and I will probably take some flack for it.
I don't know why, and I doubt it'll be. It's at a certain point. I've really tried not to say anything about it because I don't know the answers.
I hope
but I want them to be
Candace
found
sees
because I
this.
believe in justice and because I love Charlie. And but I think everything you have said, may be dismissed as crazy or evil. But tell me how.
Right.
With reference to the words you've just spoken, I don't see how someone could level a legitimate attack on you. It won't stop them. You mentioned the breaches of the president's security that have been reported. One that was reported, and I can't say whether it's true. I'm only asking to see if you know that it is true. But it's been reported that Prime Minister Netanyahu's security detail was caught twice by Secret Service attaching some kind of device to the president's Secret Service emergency response vehicle. I don't know if that's true. Have you heard that?
I've read it in the media. I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
I think the president and the vice president and several members of the cabinet going out to dinner in D.C. and the Code Pink protesters having a heads up about that to rent the table. And that's hard to do. They had to figure out where they rent the table. They had to kind of get the restaurant on board to a certain extent. To me, that's kind of almost like counting coup. It's a soft flex. It's a I can touch you whenever I want. It was Code Pink. They don't do anything. We know they're just going to be kind of crazy and annoying. However, what does that mean? That means you've got real problems with your security detail. And then, a few weeks later, you have an armed police officer who's off duty, who's not part of the president's detail, come right up and shake the president's hand. And the guy's probably patriotic American, whatever. He probably just want to shake the president's hand legitimately. But that got a lot of publicity. And what does that mean? And the president, again, President Trump is very smart. I think President Trump has a gift for interpreting large sets of data.
Yes.
And making very, very key strategic decisions. And so when the president sees that he's got issues with his own security detail, when he sees what happened in Butler with the other assassination attempts, when he sees what happened with Charlie, I think it's reasonable to believe that somewhere in his head he thinks that, maybe I don't have a choice. Maybe they could harm me or they could harm my family. And if they can't keep me safe, I believe the president deeply cares. I believe he's very courageous. I think if it was just a matter of he worried about his own physical safety, I don't think he cares. We saw that in Butler. But he does love his family, and he's got a big family. And so somewhere in his head, if they can't keep me safe, what about my family? So look, maybe the president was just simply deceived by the echo chamber we described, and that's how we got to this place. But it's also, there's a potential that there's an element of coercion, intimidation, whatever words you want to use there, that is also influencing his decision-making.
If you were assessing a similar situation in another country, a country not your own, and you as an expert on these questions, which obviously you are, I gave you the same data set you've just presented to me. And I said, would you say that's just crazy even to bring that up as a possibility?
Not at all. I mean, when you map out those data points, I would just say this moves from being a possibility to potentially, depending on how you look at it and interpret it, that this could be a likelihood. It would be something I'm sure that we would debate rigorously, but nobody would dismiss it altogether. With all this data, it's not nothing. It's something that has to be looked into.
Is it being looked into?
Again, I don't think it is. I think that with Butler, your investigative journalists found more about crooks than the entire government. And
the response I received from the FBI was so hostile that it confused me, and it still does confuse me a lot. It confuses me a lot since I didn't approach the question with anything like that in mind. I mean, we put this documentary out. We got information, the information you described. We got a lot of his online activity, which we've been told didn't exist. And this was not an attack on the FBI. This was, of course, during the last administration with a different director. So this was hardly a partisan hit job. This is the president of the United States who I campaigned for and voted for and have liked for many years. Yep. So it's not an attack. Mm-hmm. And the response that I got was hysterical.
Yep. That's
not an overstatement.
Yep.
And it confuses me.
Yeah.
Have you had experiences like that?
There was a level of, just hostility coming from really the FBI. And some of it I think is just like rivalry, like why are you looking over my shoulder? I got this. I'm very familiar with that. I mean, we're the same way in the military, so I got
I'm sure that's right.
I totally get that.
They were treating like you were in the Air Force kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you know? Like, we're the FBI. Like, gotcha. But, we had a role to play, and the way that we were aggressively blocked from that, I found the hostility to be above and beyond what you would think that you'd find with just typical, rivalry, bureaucratic rivalry, turf wars, those types of things. Some of that was at play, but the level of you cannot look at this. And then for them to escalate it, to attempt to get us kicked out of the case, that to me was very surprising. Same thing with Butler. When we first started asking questions about Butler, I thought, because especially that happened under the Biden administration, that, hey, we would come in and we would get the truth because, the previous administration really screwed this thing up. And there just wasn't curiosity there. There wasn't curiosity and there wasn't a tolerance whatsoever for us going after just the key questions of hey, did the informant that you had that was interacting with this guy, Rashant, was he in communication with anybody in Butler? I mean, basic questions to ask. Again, this is nothing that's going to blow any investigator's socks off. Just those basic questions. No, the two aren't related. You can't talk about it. You can't ask any of those questions. Even when we found data that needed to be looked at. Yeah, I mean, they would say at the time, well, the Merchant case is ongoing, et cetera. We can't interfere if that case is over. So, I mean, at this point,
I don't understand. I think this is like a new rule, which is to say a fake rule, that you're not allowed to gather information about anything that might potentially intersect with an ongoing case that's not directly related. Who made that up?
I think that's just made up. I don't, because then how do you ever investigate anything?
What law school did you go to? Right. And I asked this question and I was like, cases have been overturned on this basis. And it's like, well, cases have been overturned on many bases, but
right.
How is that? Is this like the new standard? Because you would not be able to investigate anything.
Right, exactly. We want to get to the truth. And
so what is that for those of us following along at home who don't have a high level of familiarity with the process? What could that possibly be? The current president was the subject of a near successful assassination attempt recently.
Yeah.
And we're just not going to look into very obvious leads or divulge information that everyone knows they have. For example, the surveillance tape from the shooting range at which Thomas Crooks trained, because it would answer the question, was he training with somebody? And if so, who? They have that footage and they won't release it. What could possibly be the explanation for that?
I know what the result is. The result is people come to their own conclusions, and this is where like crazy conspiracy theories come from. And then those conspiracy theories usually are easy to debunk or make the people saying them sound crazy. So then the actual question never gets answered.
Right. I'm sorry, can you say that for people who haven't lived in Washington? Okay, I try to explain this to people all the time, because this has been ongoing since at least the Kennedy assassination. But this is a very serious and reoccurring thing. It's a tactic. And you just explained it better than anyone ever. Can you just do that again if you can recall it from memory?
Yeah, I mean, so basically you give no information whatsoever on something that's obvious that there should be information. Like you outlined, like there's potentially footage of Crooks at the shooting range. Again, Police 101, go get the tapes. Let's figure it out. If you don't want to address that question, then you go silent and you say, you can't ask that question, which then creates people who come out of kind of nowhere and they start drawing their own conclusions, knowing the way the internet works. I mean, half of them, or if not more, are probably going to be so far off in left field and made by legitimate kooks or bots that then you can just be like, oh, these people asking these questions about the tape at the video range.
It's space
They're
aliens.
All crazy conspiracy theorists. They say it's a UAP or whatever. And so then you've just diverted all attention away from the thing that you're trying to conceal. And now everyone's focused on the crazies.
Man.
And then the second someone asks a legitimate question, they're crazy.
I hope everyone watching will just clip that tape and keep it on your phone and replay it every day, because that is one of the primary ways that the intel agencies and federal law enforcement influence public opinion, influence elections. That's the way they influence the perception of what's going on. But more than anything, it's the way that they hide their own behavior from.
It's just so crazy, though, because it's when you go out there and you go out on a limb to be able to ask these questions, all of a sudden you are labeled as a conspiracy theorist. I mean, at the bottom of what it is truly you're somebody that's searching for the truth. Why can we not seemingly get to the bottom of the truth? I do think that there's some kooky people out there that are definitely trying to go down all these different rabbit holes and possible variabilities. But coming from a unbiased stance on these things, it's like, okay, there's always three sides to a story, right? My side, your side, and the truth of the matter. And what I want to find out is the actual facts of what happened. And if I'm trying to piece together those facts and create this theory and put it out there into open space to talk through it, see if it makes sense, that it doesn't mean that you're a conspiracist, doesn't mean that you are some schizo person that's trying to piece it all together. It just means that you're somebody that's yearning to get to the bottom of it. And what happens time and time again is that we're continually lied to by all these individuals that know the truth of the matter, and they won't release it, and they'll use that against you. So, to the point too, is that I think it's entirely fair to be able to ask these questions, be able to have these different approaches to gain an understanding of things that are happening. So, I mean, it's just crazy how quick people will be shot down, called a conspiracist. I mean, look at Tucker. Shoot, even, Nick Fuentes, Alex Jones, how many times have these guys talked about different things and people are quick to label them as crazy, conspiracists, shut them down and try to block them out to get them to not talk about the truth of the matter. Just because the facts aren't out there doesn't mean that people can't gain them or obtain them and talk through the different theories. So obviously we won't be able to understand what was going through people's minds or understand every single thing if we weren't there. But if people can find the facts or build from what they know, doesn't mean that they're crazy. So it's just crazy how much it's actually used as a tactic against you.
The public.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the administration, I think it was it was January 23rd, was like right after the inauguration, the president issued an executive order calling for the total declassification, release of all documents relevant to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November of 1963, all of them, and also documents relevant to the assassination investigation into Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy, the Attorney General. I don't think all the Kennedy documents have been released, have they?
They were supposed to be. I mean, that was the president's order. That's what was in the executive order.
It's the law.
It's the president said it, and it's in the executive order.
Maybe you can't go there because
So
I just want to say again, and not from you, I have been told conclusively that has not happened. So without divulging anything that's classified, like anything from 1963 should be classified. The whole thing is insane and an insult to citizens. I'm a middle-aged man. I wasn't even born then. It was 6 years before I was born, and they're telling me I can't see it. Okay. It's infuriating, and it's the end of democracy. But what could possibly be the justification for keeping classified a document that
the whole premise too of why this stuff was never released was because it showed government collusion. When I think so many different things like this would implicate so much more of the US government, its involvement in different acts throughout history that would really get, become the starting stages of so much more distrust that we've come to, build with the government. I think that, the American citizens, at the very least, deserve to be told the truth of the matters. And what the American citizens have not received throughout the years is the truth of the matter. And when the government's implicating themselves in there too, I think, again, to the point, it's going to build distrust either way. But at this point too, I think that people, the very least, what we deserve is to be able to understand what's happened, and move past it. But, if the government's implicated, they're not going to release that. So there's got to be something absolutely insane that's in there.
Must under law be released.
Yeah.
And that was produced generations ago.
Yeah. I think more of this goes to the deep state, the system, the machine, whatever you want to call it. They're not hiding something in the Kennedy files, in my opinion, because it's not like the assassins wrote down on this day we're going to kill JFK and they put it in a file at CIA or FBI.
Right.
Like, that didn't happen. So I don't really think there's anything that's in particularly, would be earth shattering inside the files themselves. The system doesn't want to get us used to things being rapidly declassified. They don't want a president to be able to come in and say, here's an executive order, and I said declassify it because the people demand it, and it happens like that as fast as it could happen. They don't want that to happen. They want to condition us that, like, okay, the president of the American people elected, he may have, come in and lawfully given us an order, but there's a process here. There's an interagency process. Everyone gets to check to make sure there's nothing still classified or still ongoing, even if it was from, 1963 or even further back. Because again, they don't want us conditioned to, we can just have access to this information. And I think there's probably times where that would be appropriate, like something declassifying something that happened last week, for instance. Sure. Yeah, there's going to be equities there, and I think the American people would understand that.
I agree.
But a lot of this, I think, is power. And so the bureaucracy, when the president says declassify this, regardless of what it is, from decades ago, they can't just let them have it. They all want to have their cuts on it. They want to be able to control it. And this is the way, like, the bureaucracy and the career bureaucrats roll. And they just tell the new political appointees, like, hey, we just, we really can't do that. But we'll get us to a place that mostly will get you what you want eventually. And then it all just gets killed off in process. And there's literally no transparency at the end of the day, or limited transparency. But that's what I think the game is here. They don't want to condition us that you can elect a president and he can automatically change the bureaucracy.
I mean, this fact, the fact that the government doesn't have to tell you what it's doing, even though you pay for it, just invalidates the whole concept of consent to the governed. Like, how can you give consent to something you know nothing about?
Yeah.
Right. But more than that, it creates a moral poison at the center of the society. Lying is a sin. It's the core sin. And lies beget lies, and they, like cancer, destroy the body in which they live.
Yeah.
And if you care about the body, this country, if you're from here and you hope to live here and have grandchildren here, you have to fix that. And I really think that telling the truth, radically telling the truth, is the only thing that gets you there. And the pain that entails, and it does entail pain, there's no doubt about it, and humiliation, is much smaller a price to pay than the price that we will pay.
And I think that what, ultimately to the point that I was saying a few minutes ago, was what it really comes down to is there's been such a rapid distrust for the government in general, right? Where what we've been seeing is that the American people are seemingly tired of getting lied to time and time again. We're seemingly building more and more distrust of the U.S. government, which is something that is it's entirely something you don't want to see happen in the longevity of it all, right? When we are continued to be lied to time and time again, and we build that distrust, it's going to meet the politicians with so much opposition, they're not going to be able to control it anymore. A way to be able to move past that is to start being able to declassify these things, be able to talk about it. Like when they're talking about JFK files, JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, all these things that the CIA, FBI had involvement in. When they continue to hide these things 60 years after the fact, it's not helping us move past the part of, all this distrust we've built with the government. Seemingly the best way to be able to move forward would be able to start to talk about that, give us more honesty, be more open, because like I said a few different times already, is the American people deserve to have some type of truth given to them. The American people are the ones that this entire establishment is built on. If people don't understand that if the American people want this entire establishment to be done, the American people can make that change. And I think that's something that people have really lost the sight of, that this establishment was built to benefit the people. And, to the point too, is Do I think that, like they had just previously stated, do I think that certain things should be declassified within 24 hours? No, I don't. Like they said, there, could be still equity involved, and people involved that, are working for the U.S. government, that you seemingly would not want to declassify in that given moment. But when you're going back 60 years and you're continually just telling people that they're crazy, when there was, things that were released and then had implications of U.S. government involvement in other foreign, agencies as well, and then all of a sudden we're not getting the full gist of it. It's like, okay, at what point are you guys going to start telling us the truth? Because what's happening is you're pushing us into a corner, continually pushing us back into this corner where guess what's going to happen? The people are going to completely revolt on you. They're going to want to overthrow the system and put some system in there that's going to be beneficial to the people. Because right now, I feel like a lot of the American people in general are so beat down and, just being embattered from just having to work all these different, 50, 60, 70 hours just to get by, working paycheck to paycheck. Gas is increasing, groceries are increasing, and the general population of the American people is growing increasingly more and more unhappy. So when they're already unhappy, they have a huge distrust for you. At what point are you going to start to correct that course that you're on? Because the course you're on right now is going towards land, and you're going to run aground and hit a bunch of rocks and sink your ship. So at what point are you going to make that turn and get that ship off to safety, right? That's, I think, a lot of what the premises of what they're talking about, is for a perfect harmony to exist, this kind of little coexistence of the U.S. government and the U.S. citizens, is there needs to be some sort of level of trust that's a common ground for us all. We're not having that. Like they spoke about a little bit earlier with, the whole Charlie Kirk situation. There's a level of distrust because we feel we're being lied to on that. I believe we are being lied to on that. Even this Nancy Guthrie case in Arizona, the FBI gets involved in that. We're not hearing about it. What about the assassination attempt on Trump and Butler? We're not hearing about it. What about all these different failures, things that are currently happening or have happened that we're not hearing about it? We're just continually fed narratives. So I think to the point too is the people are just entirely over this. We're done with it. So, that's the point that it's getting to.
Inevitably, and maybe soon, if we don't do it, I don't think this is sustainable, this level of lying in any society.
No, and if people don't think that their vote matters, that they can actually elect someone and change can be enacted, I think things go to a very, very dark place.
Of course.
And people lose faith in our system.
Right.
And our system is based on that faith that, we get to have these elections. In theory, hopefully, if the elections are free and fair, we've got a lot of issues there as well. But when you finally get your person in office, that they're going to be able to control the government that the people pay for.
And I think that's one thing too, just to kind of have a sidebar conversation. I think so many people have learned to have this level of distrust where they don't even want to go out and vote anymore. They don't view that their vote even matters. They don't want to, be involved. We have people are so exhausted of this political ecosystem that we've created, right? In my opinion, politics were never meant to be a conversation at the dinner table. But for the past 10, 15, 20 years, it's increasingly become a conversation more and more at the dinner table. Why? Because the federal government has continued to get more involved and intertwined in your daily lives. You have them getting involved in every single different movement. And it's like, okay, at what point are you guys going to start just running the government and putting the people's best interests at heart, rather than sitting there and continuing to do things for foreign governments? But the people are just so exhausted right now. They don't want to talk about politics. But what it comes down to is we need more people now more than ever to be able to talk about politics. More people now than ever that need to get involved in politics. It's something that starts at home, right? Getting involved in your politics in your state. And guess what? When you can start taking over the power of the states again, then you can start pushing off into the federal government. Nothing will ever change so long as we sit there by the wayside and continue to let these politicians put everyone else first. I mean, you have guys like James Fishback running for governor in Florida, really just putting some big opposition against these big billionaire lobbies that are funding all of our politicians. When are we going to get more of that across the United States? Because that's what we need more of. More people in their states, running for, running for city council, running for the mayor, more people at a smaller state level to start building into something bigger. Because I think, unfortunately, a lot of our politicians, especially when you get to the top, the federal government, a lot of them have been already bought and paid for by foreign entities. And the only way we're ever going to be able to change that is by starting off small and growing it bigger. But the people do have a voice. The people ultimately can be the one who changes this establishment as a whole. And that's what this government needs. We need to be the people that change that. We need to be the people that stand up and fight for, what we want as a whole. Because we have gotten to a point where we don't want to talk with each other. We've gotten to a point where we're so divided as a people. And that's just a bad road to follow down. We need to be able to have those conversations, whether they're tough or not. We need to be able to have a democracy. We need to be able to have an understanding that my opinion is going to be different than your opinion. That's going to be different than his or hers opinion. So that's the point of where we're at in society, is that we need to be able to get back to talking. We need to be able to get back to coming together, having different thoughts and opinions and processes, and agreeing to disagree, but being able to move forward together for a common goal. And what we're seeing right now is that there is no common goal for the betterment of the United States citizens. So
that are supposed to be ran with the folks that they voted for, that they'll actually get their will implemented, or at least what's in the best interest for them implemented.
That's right.
And that's just not the case right now.
No, it's not. So I want to end with a hopeful note. So we've been talking about this for 24 hours, because I think that without even getting into it, anyone who's followed it carefully and is thinking clearly can see that the war with Iran is potentially like the end of a lot for the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we could overstate the consequences of this. And I don't think I'm being hysterical. I've had 3 weeks to think about it. I've actually had 10 years to think about it, because that's how long they've been pushing for it. So at this point, it feels like there's no way out. But you were saying to me this morning in a really thoughtful way that gave me hope that you think there is a way out. And so I'm going to stand back and let you explain how you think that the United States can exit with a lot of its interests intact and its honor intact, and the president's administration intact, because the political cost of this is shocking. I mean, it's not the most important thing, but like right now it's all very broken. Okay. What's the answer?
It's going to take drastic action. And the good news is, I believe that this is something that President Trump is uniquely qualified to fix on his own through his sheer willpower. President Trump has an amazing ability. It's almost his superpower, I think, to be able to kind of breathe life into ideas, and again, to capture large data sets and to find leverage. And right now, it's clear that this conflict will just continue the way it is and get exponentially worse, especially if we go down the path of demanding a total surrender with boots on the ground, or maybe even something far worse. What President Trump
that is the path we're on.
Inevitably, if we say it's total surrender, what does total surrender mean? Now, again, this is where President Trump is uniquely suited. President Trump can define his own total surrender. He's in charge. I ended my letter with, you hold the cards, because President Trump truly does hold the cards. He's a very powerful, very respected leader. And what I think President Trump must do is, number one, he has to address the main issue. The main issue is what the Israelis are doing. And he needs to very forcefully, and probably with a new team of diplomats, go to the Israelis and say, you're done. We will defend you. We will make sure that ballistic missiles aren't rained down upon you. However, you are done going on the offense, because this is our war. We're paying for it. We're bleeding for it. This is not your war. If you choose to continue this offensive operation, we're out. And as a matter of fact, if you choose to continue, we will start withdrawing features of your defense system so that you will be on your own. We have to say that to them. And we have to be very blunt. We have to be very forceful. And I know a lot of people who like the Israelis, are going to say, we can't do that. That's wrong. They're under fire, et cetera. But if we don't do that, if we don't address our relationship with the Israelis, even if we come up with a temporary ceasefire, we'll be right back in the same situation in very short order. So that's the first thing that President Trump must do, address the main.
And unfortunately, to the point, though, I didn't mean to cut him off at that point, too, but I just want to get this thought out. I truly do believe that Trump does hold all the cards in that respect, right? That if Trump wants to have that type of change and wants to be able to see that change happen, that he's going to be the one that has to dictate the change himself. Now, like Joe had also mentioned, was that he needs an entire different array of diplomats. I think it starts with getting rid of the likes of Steve Witkoff, getting rid of the likes of Howard Lutnick and Jared Kushner and Susie Wiles. Stop associating with people like Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro and Laura Loomer. Because if that's the people that you are sourcing your information from, sourcing your decisions on, basing your diplomacy on, that those are going to be people that never will have America's interests at heart. So it needs to be able to start with getting rid of people like that, cutting the ties, severing the ties there. and being able to make that change. And I do think that ultimately it comes down to being able to have a firm plan of action. You need to be able to be firm on it, start cutting them off, let them know. I mean, at the end of the day, what we're not going to be is some beta type of bitch, essentially, that's going to be allowing a foreign government to dictate essentially everything that we're doing. We're the ones that have been paying them billions, $350 billion since their inception. Actually, I believe the count's probably closer to 400 billion now with this war. But we've been the ones that have been setting them up for success the whole way. And what we've been doing is allowing them to go continually on an aggressive front and start attacking every single one of these countries around them, and falling back on us to defend them. And to me, when we're not having threats and we're not, I mean, I just don't, I'm seemingly losing. I'm really lost in the fact that we're told that they're our greatest allies, but what have they been doing for us? They're bleeding us dry. They're getting us into conflicts that American lives have been lost at. So a greatest ally wouldn't start leading us off into foreign wars and foreign conflicts. And guess what's happening? I mean, like I said earlier too, is you have Israel that's just, blowing up this entire economy. What's the bigger thing that's going to happen after all this? So, the amount of damage that Israel's been doing to the Middle East, the amount of damage they're doing throughout this entirety of this conflict, it's going to be really, we're going to feel these effects, for the next 2 years. It's going to take a lot of time for the world, not just the US, to bounce back because of their actions. And we're allowing it. So at what point are we going to be able to put the foot down and say enough's enough? Stop going on the offensive. Stop attacking these countries. Stop damaging all this oil, everything going on in the Middle East. Just enough's enough. Or you're going to be left on your own, because we've been supporting this. We've been supporting this chaos for way too long. So, but again, to the point, I think that Trump is far too entangled in his current situation to be able to pull out of this situation. So, yeah, it's just like he's in too deep. The only way that we're going to have change is by getting rid of every single one of these politicians.
The main issue is how the Israelis are out of control, and they are driving this entire war. Address that aggressively, get the Israelis to stop.
How realistically, just having lived through this whole thing, how hard will that be?
It will be hard, but again, President Trump can do it. President Trump can call the Prime Minister of Israel and get him to the table. President Trump can force it. I believe that. I truly believe that.
Side note, can we all just... Joe, I wish you would just tell everyone, is Bibi Netanyahu dead? So we've seen a lot of AI of Bibi Netanyahu, but you know what's crazy? Is that Bibi's plane, after the Wing of Zion, after it flew into Germany, hasn't left. So how did he get back into Israel?
He can. So I think it's doable. It's only doable with President Trump. And then from there, once we get the Israelis to stop, we still, for now, have strong allies in the Gulf. We have the Emiratis, Qataris, the Saudis, the Bahrainis, all these actors, the Omanis. They may not always agree with each other, but they're all pretty good partners with us. I think we need to use them. And again, I think we probably need to bring in some new diplomats, and we need to aggressively engage with the Iranians while we can to get to a ceasefire and to come up with a way that we can stop the killing, we can stop the destruction of not just these countries, not just the loss of more life, but basically the collapse of the energy system that we have right now, so that we can open the Straits of Hormuz back up again, and so that we can make sure the petrodollar is being used. Because right now we didn't stop the flow of oil going to the Chinese. The Chinese are still getting their oil out, and they're settling those transactions in yuan, not the petrodollar. So we have to, once we get the Israelis to stop, we have to aggressively pursue our economic interests. And I think the only good thing in here is that our economic interests are in line with not just the GCC countries, but also with the Iranians. Because the Iranians want this war to stop. They want to be able to rebuild their energy sector. They want to be able to revitalize their energy sector. And on this mutual cooperation to open up the Straits of Hormuz and to build back the energy sector, I think we could come up with a peace.
We'd have to lift some sanctions.
We have to lift some sanctions, yeah.
And why wouldn't we? We've had sanctions for decades, and according to the neocons, they had no effect on the nuclear program, which posed an imminent threat. So, what is the argument? We've had...
That's just time and time again that the U.S. will try to go. You have to understand that Iran is better set up for success to be able to deal with Russia and China and their economies, because that's what we've forced them into. we've placed all these different sanctions on them. And what seemingly has happened is that they just were pushed further and further into dealing with China and Russia and North Korea. Just because we put sanctions on them doesn't mean it affects them, but we try to do that economically to be able to shut these governments down, to get these people to be at a civil unrest. But guess what? Russia, China, they have massive economical infrastructures. So, we're placing these sanctions on them, trying to do all this stuff. It just starts to harm us more so in the long scheme of things, in my opinion.
Sanctions for decades, and I don't see how we benefited from that at all.
We didn't. I mean, we just lifted sanctions on Syria because the regime changed there, but we lifted sanctions on a guy who used to be the former leader of Al-Qaeda.
Right, because he's pro-Israel.
So I'm pretty sure we can go ahead and lift some sanctions. It would be in our benefit to lift the sanctions. Because not only would it help us in the war, but also a condition of lifting the sanctions would be you will settle all transactions that you're going to get from your new oil industry that will be reintroduced to the world economy. You'll settle that in the dollar. And we need the dollar to survive if we want our country in its current state to survive as well. So the lifting of sanctions in this case very much works out in our national interest. That to me, and I'm sure there's lots of different variations we could have of this plan, but President Trump aggressively enacting this and addressing the Israelis first and foremost. Otherwise, any kind of negotiation we try to have with the Iranians or
Sorry, I sped it up a little bit more.
They're simply not going to take us seriously.
Why would they?
Precisely. Why would they? And every day that this goes on, again, the more, I have no love for anybody in power in Iran right now, but the more the leaders we kill in Iran, you're not getting a Thomas Jefferson next. It's not like if we kill 15 or 20 of them, the 16th or the 21st guy is Thomas Jefferson or he's a moderate. Yep. Absolutely not.
It's very obvious to me that some of these strikes, not all, but some, were conducted with the intent of making a negotiated settlement impossible. And that leads me to the saddest thing, a whole cluster of sad things, but the saddest thing is the bombing of the girls' school attached to the Iranian naval base. And the U.S. has admitted we did it.
To the point, though, of what Tucker is saying right there, too. I mean, when you're going in there and you're taking out these different regime leaders, right, there's some level of, okay, well, you're still leaving open the door to be able to go back in and have a conversation with these individuals, right? You're still leaving, a door open for diplomacy to be able to have these conversations and work past this. But by us opening up the door and firstly attacking a school full of children, and then, starting to really just try to collapse them even more by attacking their oil fields too. At some point, you're just going to have this entire regime hate you. This regime's not going to want to talk to you. It's going to build more extremists than it will any good of it. So, the direction that we're going on is more of a path of destruction, more of something that's going to, lead to more instability in the entire region and a collapse of the entire global economic system. Rather than us ever getting back to any type of diplomatic standing that we would have had beforehand. So,
but I'm wondering about the targeting coordinates and where those came from. Is it possible that those came from Israel?
That I don't know.
Are you aware of, has been publicly reported or in previous conflicts?
Now.
Can you say anything that you're not constrained by? Is it possible that could have happened? I mean, have there been strikes, American strikes on targets in the past that you're aware of that have used coordinates supplied by Israel?
Yeah, and we share so much intelligence with Israel.
Right. So, right, of course. So it's entirely possible. But
it's kind of a good loophole. I wonder if Tucker knew he couldn't answer that. And that's why I led down that one. It's a really good loophole of a question. Just going to point that one out real quick too. So to what he just said as well is that we, USA, have bombed different places based on coordinates given to us by Israeli intelligence. So it could be very well possible that we also bombed and attacked that school full of children based on Israeli intelligence. So
no one has said anything about it, but it's entirely possible the coordinates were given to us by Israel. And why wouldn't they be? Because once you start doing things like that, it's intentionally or not, it's very hard to get out of it. And
obviously from the way the Israelis have conducted themselves in the Gaza war and other places, they have a much different way of fighting than we do. I mean, America definitely makes mistakes, and we do everything that we can. I can tell you as a guy who fought on the ground, Americans, almost to a fault sometimes, we do everything that we can to prevent the loss of civilian life. I mean, almost to the point where sometimes we risk our own lives deliberately to not kill Americans, to not kill innocent civilians. So again, this is where being in partnership.
Now, the count that we've been seeing is over 1,500 civilians have been killed.
But then also just a different standard for how they fight. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous for us.
To be in partnership with a country that has different goals and different standards of behavior on the battlefield.
In different ways and means, yeah, they just have a whole different way of
So how would you describe the Israeli attitude toward the killing of innocents?
Look, the Israelis are in a hard spot. And as somebody who fought for most of my life, I think I can get in their heads pretty easily. If I was an Israeli, I think I would have the same view. I think I would say, like, well, we're going to fight them at some point anyways. If there's civilians in that area that's militarily important to us, whatever. Like, I have a job to do. I understand that. But it's also important for us to understand our air quotes partners. If we're going to be in a partnership with them, we have to be clear-eyed about that. Just because they speak English and a lot of them went to school over here and we have dual citizens doesn't mean that they're going to target the same way that we do. We have to be clear-eyed about it. And that's what I think is missing. If we're going to do joint operations with the Israelis, they are going to, look, we saw what happened in Gaza. And you can say that's a horrible thing. You can say that's just the way it is. But that is the way the Israelis fight. And so we have to go into that with clear eyes and understand that's how they're going to fight. And now we're going to be viewed as being not just complicit, but we're going to be viewed as being partners in that. And again, that's a very dangerous place for us to be because at least our tactical objectives have been pretty clear that we want to take down the ballistic missiles, nuclear program, the Navy, the Army, et cetera. And those are military targets. But we're in partnership right now with the Israelis, who they're going after some military targets, but they're going after a heck of a lot more that are not military targets.
It's a very generous assessment of their motives. And I mean, as a compliment, I strongly disagree with you, but then I didn't spend my life fighting wars. And you're making every attempt to get into their perspective, even if you disagree with it, which I assume you do. And I think that is the way to assess things. It's like, what's the other guy's perspective, even if I hate it?
Well, yeah, look, in the Middle East, you're going to do business with some unsavory characters. In the world, you're going to do business with some unsavory characters. So if you're going to be doing business there, just get comfortable with the fact that some of these guys are unsavory. I mean, the classic, I think, President Trump line really early on when he was asked like if he thought Putin was a killer. And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, we're killers too. You know what I mean?
He's right.
He was just very logical about that and very clear-eyed about that. Again, this is why President Trump is uniquely qualified to solve this problem because I think he has the ability to understand things from multiple perspectives at the same time and then find our leverage and then find out what's best for our objectives, for America's objectives with clear eyes. Yep. And that's what we have to be.
Do you anticipate you'll be speaking to the president again?
I would welcome it. I mean, I spoke with him before I departed the administration.
How did that go?
It went great. I mean, not the best conversation ever. You know, I told him why I was leaving. He heard me out. He was very respectful.
He was?
Yeah, very respectful. He was very kind. He always is. And I think we departed personally on good terms. Again, I'm an adult. I understand the way I left and writing the letter that there's parts of his administration that are going to have to come after me and try and discredit me. I understand that. But I think the president is someone who listens. And so I think he's listening, not necessarily just to me and to you, but I think he is listening to a lot of different people because I think he knows at a core level this is not going well and he needs to find a way for us to get out of this.
Yep. You're definitely an adult. And I wish there were more of them. And I appreciate all the time you spent here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Very much. Joe Kent. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks for watching the Wednesday.
So I do know Joe Kent's going to be on some different platforms as well. But, you know, to the point, though, I definitely want to just kind of do an overview on that. You know, just the text that we've been seeing on Joe Kent over the past 24 hours has been something that has been, quite frankly, a little bit more, I don't know, unsavory. It's just kind of dissatisfying to see it. You have all these people that have seemingly not done anything for this country, just really coming at him. Quite frankly, I'm entirely over it. I don't care to hear any more of their opinions anymore. But you know, he's just a really stand-up guy, and you know, I've got to applaud him for being able to go through that and maintain a level head, talk about the things he agrees with, doesn't agree with. I mean, that's just him standing on his moral higher ground too. So, you know, obviously he's a Christian, has his beliefs, and he stands true to them. And I hope that more men in America would start to make a stand for their faith, their morals, their standings, and go against the opposition, even if it's going to be difficult too. So, you know, kudos to him. Definitely want to support him. But it's just crazy times we're living in right now. So I'm going to be done and off for the night. I'm absolutely exhausted. But to anyone that tuned in and watched, I definitely want to say thank you. Obviously, I'm trying to grow the page, figure out my direction that I want to take this. I know I've done a couple of fun videos in the past, definitely like being able to have fun. But I want to find if my direction is going to be more so talking in a serious manner on these videos, or if I want to have more of a fun route too. I find that there's a common divide, but especially in these times, you know, joking about different matters, trying to make light of them, not everyone's going to want to see that. So, you know, to anyone that's going to watch this down the road too, any little like, subscribe, comment, maybe some messages, you know, through Instagram of different things you want to see, I would be hugely grateful to you, just to get a little bit of feedback on them. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and definitely want to continue to talk about a little bit more of hot topics, things that are happening day to day, and giving a different perspective on it, or maybe resonating with your perspective. So appreciate y'all.